Hello everybody and welcome to the yearly tradition that is, or that are, the tier lists. The scenario tier list always happen near June, and I think I'm just getting under the buzzer for having this release in June. 2026 has been a weird year for playing board games. If you don't know, I was on hiatus for a bit, and I'm now back fully. But our content is kind of changing. So like how Arkham went through a transition into a new release format, PBG is also kind of shifting into a new release format. But the tier list will continue because they're fun to do, and I like kind of just checking in with myself and seeing how all these scenarios line up for me. Why are you cut off like that? There we go. That looks so much nicer. I was like, the gathering's cut off. That can't be right. All right, let's talk about our tiers. One of the best. These are one of the best scenarios. These are like the best of the best that exist in Arkham. These are the ones that I always enjoy playing for a variety of different reasons, but these are the ones that really frickin' cook. They're very good scenarios. Amazing scenarios are exactly that. They're amazing, but they're not like in the upper echelon, right? Like they're like a tier, they're tier 2, right? Like there's like the S tier and then there is like the A+ tier, and that's kind of where these amazing scenarios go. These are scenarios that I always enjoy playing, but I kind of view them as just like not really like revolutionary in terms of where I find them and how I find them to be played, or even like in repeat plays. I guess like the luster is not like these ones, the luster never goes away, right? These ones, the luster isn't gone, but it's a little bit less shiny, if that makes sense. Great scenarios are great, so a little bit less than amazing. See, we have a lot of good, we have 4 tiers to do the good stuff here. Great scenarios, I always enjoy playing, but they may not be as memorable as some of the amazing or one of the best, but they're definitely better than good. Good scenarios are just good. They're good scenarios. I like playing them, but I'm not like chomping at the bit to play them, or not excited to play them, or like see how they test my deck. A big thing about also is how these test my deck. I kind of like seeing that kind of stuff. And like good doesn't really do that. It's kind of just like standard Arkham. Fine, we're gonna start getting into the stuff that is just like, I consider these to be below average. So like good is like a perfectly average scenario. Once we get to fine, things start to become a little bit below average and a little bit less exciting for me to want to play with or want to engage with. Annoying, or when we get to scenarios, now we start getting into stuff that I actively think are bad. Well, I think that there are, in like the hugs and kisses way of saying this is that I don't really view there to be a specific like bad scenarios in Arkham, because what would be my least favorite scenario is someone else's favorite scenario. I'm not a big fan of the Circle Undone, but I know a lot of people like Circle Undone. So I'm taking this from like a personal perspective because this is my own tier list. I don't like playing it at all, or scenarios that I do. Sorry, annoying is like these are scenarios that are starting to find I'm on the bad side of my opinion, where these scenarios are, I think, starting to get a little bit bad, and then this reaches a maximum crescendo with I don't like playing it at all. These scenarios just I do not like. I actively dislike playing, and you could even say I might hate them. This is the first time I think in a while that I've played every scenario in one of these tier lists, so rather than playing the I haven't played this, I have 2 new tiers that are kind of in like the unranked category still, which is intrigued, but I need to play the scenario more, or not intrigued, but need to play more. So what you can find then is that the intrigued is kind of living somewhere in this in the future, and the not intrigued is kind of living in these 3 tiers. So that's what we're looking at. Enough of the yapping of the setting up out of the way. Why don't we dive into our first expansion, which is Core, back in the day, Core 2025, starting with The Gathering. So The Gathering is the intro scenario, and I think overall it is a fine scenario. It doesn't really have a lot of dynamics because it's kind of here to teach players the game, and like that is something that it accomplished. But it didn't, it's not really like something I look forward to playing, right? Like I'm not excited to be like, oh my god, The Gathering. As a matter of fact, in the original Core, the only scenario I ever really play is Midnight Masks, right? So The Gathering is not really it's just kind of there. It's not bad. It's not good. The Ghoul Priest is a good villain. I think the design on the Ghoul Priest is actually really cool. Classic sort of like culty vibes with the deer skull, right? Like I think that's really cool. And it's kind of neat to play as a new player, to be like, this Ghoul Priest guy is impossible, to then later play in the Gathering again and being like, holy hell, I actually crushed this Ghoul Priest. He didn't stand a chance. I think that's a really cool part of the scenario, but I don't think it's enough to make the scenario actually worth playing. On to the Midnight Masks, which our boy Wolfman. This is one of the best scenarios. Like, it's kind of crazy how they, like, knocked it out of the park, like, almost immediately, right? That they were able to create this incredible scenario, like, in the core box, right? Like that, then like, and it's one of those things that it's like stood the test of time, right? Like, it's as good as it was when I first played it to whenever I play it again. There's a reason why Travis Byrne and I use it as the scenario to play our meme decks or our fun decks or our standalone decks, because it is just a great scenario. I've seen some recent criticism of the scenario where it's kind of just it doesn't test the right things in comparison to what current Arkham tests. And while I think that is kind of a fair general criticism, I don't think it's really an accurate criticism, because in my opinion, an Arkham scenario shouldn't have a checklist of the things it checks, right? Like, it shouldn't be testing your deck for, do you have good willpower? Do you have good agility? Do you have cards to discard? Do you have assets to take control of? Do you have damage and horror soak, right? I do feel like a good Arkham scenario does generally hyper-fixate its targeting on specific mechanics, as opposed to kind of just being like a paint by numbers, we're going to hit everything to just make sure that those are being tested, right? And Midnight Masks doesn't actually do a lot to test, like, things that you traditionally now see in an Arkham scenario, but I don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think that the more kind of general paint by numbers style of design is ultimately making scenarios, it has the potential to make scenarios worse, right? Like, I'm not going to say that this is like something that is happening, but it's like something that I especially see in, like, when I play some custom content where it kind of just feels like they're trying to make, they're not trying to tick people off, right? But I think some of the best scenarios in Arkham are actively designed to tick people off, and I think that that is a more engaging form of scenario design. So that's one of the things I'm kind of just setting up, because we are going to kind of revisit this when we get to Smoke and Mirrors, which you can't see, but it's right here. Because I think Smoke and Mirrors is, I mean, the new Core 2026 is very similar to original Core. For better and for worse in some cases, in my current ideas. I think the Cultist showing up is really cool. I think that there's just a lot to love about Midnight Masks. The Masked Hunter flip is still one of the best kind of like plot twists in an Arkham scenario that's ever happened. And it's kind of fun where you can kind of see it coming in future stuff, where it's like, ooh, there's gonna be that something happens on this agenda flip, and I am excited to see what that is. I think that kind of stuff is really, really cool. Should have trolled everyone and made a chapter 2 list only. Honestly, that would have been a great way to make this video done by now, wouldn't it? Because when I say we're going to be talking about Smoke and Mirrors in the future, I mean like probably like 2.5 hours from now. So that's going to be crazy. All right, Devourer below. I don't like playing this scenario at all. I think that there is a good testament to that. This is the design where the original like concept of Arkham was that you weren't gonna beat the bad guys, right? Like, that the last scenario was like the conflict with the enemy that then became overwhelming, and then you were like, oh my god, we're gonna die, we need to throw our person into the fire. By the way, there's gonna be spoilers throughout this, but I have time coded every section if you did want to jump and avoid spoilers. But we need to throw our partner into the evil ghoul monster, because that's the only way that we can get out alive. And I think that that concept works really well if... Okay, I think that concept works really well. However, what I imagine happened is that once people started to play the 8 scenario campaigns in Dunwich Legacy, they realized that the players wanted to win, right? Because I think, personally, there's a big difference between playing a 3 scenario campaign and then, like, losing at the end. Because you're like, well, you know, we played it, we lost, that's all right. You know, like, it only took us 3 sessions, that's not that bad. We weren't that heavily invested. In fact, we even did it in one evening. Compared to, we played 8 scenarios. We fell in love with our decks, we fell in love with our investigators, we fell in love with the story, and now we get to the finale, and what do you mean? It's like soul-crushingly unfair, like in the kind of the same way that like the Devourer Below is intentionally designed to be soul-crushingly unfair. And then there was a lot of kind of like, I imagine, kickback of being like, no, but I want to win. Like, I want to win this game, right? Like, because the stakes grew, because we had more time with the scenarios, more time with our decks, it became harder to want to lose, right? And I do think that the idea of wanting the players to lose, or at least make choices that are hard to come up with some sort of win, with a very hard way to actually win it, the Devourer Below was like a perfect kind of storm for that concept of design. Do I think that ultimately that... I think that ultimately that hasn't stayed, right? Like, now at this point, it's kind of hard to lose a campaign. Albeit, I will say something. There are certain finales, like, let's say, Fate of the Vale versus Doom of Arkham Part 2, where I think the designers have been, like, the new designers have been trying to find that balance, right? Because I do think that Fate of the Vale is purposely a very hard final scenario. I think that at lower player counts, it's probably the hardest finale we've had since Devourer Below, right? And I think that that is something that then there was kind of like a pivot for this one. It's like trying to find like the perfect balance for that final scenario, because again, there's so much in it that I think that it's kind of like this whole, like, we're seeing kind of like the consequence of what the original Arkham experience was, right? And that kind of came into a perfect storm with the Devourer Below. And I know I'm saying all this still with my intro, like, this is my intro sentence of I understand the design philosophy behind Devourer Below, and I haven't really talked about the scenario itself. Hey, Dice Gods, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime. But it's one of those things where I think it's very important to kind of acknowledge this, where this is where Arkham started, and this is kind of where we have this idea that you lose Arkham, and how we have kind of pivoted away from Arkham. And I'm curious to see in these 3 scenario campaigns if they kind of get back more into the, hey, you're going to lose Arkham more, we're going to make it harder, because it's only 3 scenarios, which means you can get it done in less time, there's less investment, and it's easier to just like run it back, right? Because like, let's say like, for example, you play like 3 scenarios a night, right? Like, let's just like say in this world, because this is something Travis Spurn and I often do. We usually get through 3 scenarios in a night if they're not crazy long. And we lose, right? I'm a lot easier to run back, like Dunwich. Sorry, no, it's much easier to run back something besides like Dunwich Legacy or Path to Carcosa, because then that's 2.5 weeks, right? That's 8 scenarios over 3 sessions. But if I lose, say, Core 2026 or Core 2015, I can be like, yeah, we're just gonna run it back, right? We'll run it back next week, see if we can do it again, see if we can complete this challenge. And I'm very curious to see how that goes. So the reason why I don't like playing Devourer Below is not actually because of its soul-crushing difficulty. I think the scenario is just kind of a little bit chunky. It's like the hook, I don't think like, in the way that The Gathering was like a perfect on-the-rails intro scenario and tutorial scenario, and Midnight Mask was like this really cool open-world Arkham board game-like experience, Devourer Below, I don't think actually succeeded in hitting the idea of exploring the woods of Arkham in a way that was actually engaging and interesting. I think it was actually just kind of like a little bit like I put the brush over this, and this is painted like a scary tree, and this one's painted like a scary house, right? There's not really anything to make it feel flavorfully like you're doing what you are doing. So I think that it's neat. It's neat in concept, but it's bad in execution, right? Because it's like, why does this one use my brain rather than just being a gotcha, right? Like, because kind of like the gotcha idea for the scenarios doesn't really seem that interesting. It's also kind of like it has that design flaw where the best way to play it is to not play it and just go up against Udmordhoth at the end, right? And I don't know if that's particularly like engaging. I don't mind the treachery that deals you like 5 horror. Like, I think that that's really cool for the final scenario. I think that ultimately though, it's just kind of like bad. Right? Like, it's just kind of bad in some of its design decisions. Devour Below getting a lot of screen time. Yeah, man. This is the one time of the year I get to talk about it, so it gets its time. And it's kind of a very important thing talking about, like, the difficulty of scenarios and then, like, the bad design of the scenarios. But, yeah. I think that Devour Below is a cool theme, but I don't think they explore the theme well, and I think that ultimately it leaves a lot to be desired, and its mechanics on its wood locations are ultimately very empty. All right, let's go on to Dunwich here, and we're going to try to not spend too long on the Dunwich Legacy. Overall, I think the Dunwich Legacy is a campaign that is fun to play. I love its simplicity, and I think that like where people say it is dated, I think it is actually kind of good in some ways. Like, the dated designs, I think, are actually, like, strong designs in retrospect, apart from a few balancing issues, right? Like, I think that there are some balancing issues with the design, but I think there's a lot of really cool scenario concepts that are explored very well here, and I do like that it's designed in a way that it's designed in the way that's like, hey, you're not getting a lot of experience, so like you're gonna have to deal with that. And unfortunately, a lot of players deal with it by just loading up on XP cards. I know it. I'm one of them, but I think that it's a cool concept for like compared to some of the other ones. And the enemies are fucking hard in this scenario, in these campaigns. I feel like, you ever looked at some of these enemies here? Like, I know that like a lot of new campaigns do have tough enemies as well, but like, especially with the way you get experience in this one and how much lower you are at the end, like, there are some tough ass enemies in this campaign. I think that I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to kind of do like an intro thing to just kind of like set the stage for this the campaign, and then we can start diving into it. All right, extracurricular activity. This is a fine scenario. It's not great. It's not like bad. It's kind of just there. I love the slot machine Jazz Mulligan thing where it's like, is Jazz going to be in the top 5? Like, is Jazz going to be in the top 5? Is he going to be in the bottom 5? Are we ever going to find Jazz? I think that that's really cool. I think that this scenario kind of hurts a little bit where you, like, most of the time when I play it, people always play it second, just because House always wins. You kind of always play it first. So there's like a little bit like illusion of choice for this kind of thing. It's one of those things where I think that that does kind of hurt the scenario a little bit. I think there's nothing wrong with playing it first, right? Like, it becomes very easy if you play it first. It's kind of one of those things where like the balance is a little bit skewed, right? Where House always wins, it's kind of like better to play it first because it's tighter on time, even if you play it first. And extracurricular activity is, you have so much time if you play it first, so they kind of like naturally go into a position that kind of makes both scenarios a little bit more engaging. I do think I wish that extracurricular activity had a little bit of a spicier finish, but alas, it does not. House Always Wins is a good scenario. I love the gambling mechanic, even if sometimes you just get screwed by bad luck. But hey, the house always wins, baby. That's the name of the scenario. The O'Banions are walking out of this with more money than they started the night with, right? Like, that's kind of their goal. I think that this is a really cool scenario for kind of showcasing what Arkham is to new players, right? Where Arkham is a story game. And I kind of wish that there was a revisit of this idea so this is what I mean when I was talking about how, like, Dunwich does things differently, right? Where in the new Arkham design, there would be like, what, I'm a cluever. I'm supposed to get clues. Where the fuck are my clues, right? To advance the scenario. But I think that, like, the cooler way of doing it is to sometimes paint a picture where it's like, you got to get clues without investigating, brother. You got to be gambling at this scenario. And I think the House Always Wins does a really good job of setting up this cool thematic scene and then taking advantage of it. I love how there's like the floor manager who's following you around at the start. He's following your clover because he can tell he's the smartest guy in the room. I just think that there's a lot of really cool pieces for the House Always Wins. What's keeping it from being great or amazing is just the fact that, like, it's not those things. That's the best criticism I can give for mine. It just, it feels like the back half of the scenario, while a tense rush of, like, decision making and all that, and, like, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of, like, action taxes on you as a player. It's not really in a way that's, like, engaging. It's kind of, again, just like the numbers are big and you need to beat those numbers. Miskatonic Museum. So I actually just played this scenario yesterday. And we actually had the hunting horror on turn 2. Just finished Innsmouth with my girlfriend. Both a polar opposite experience with the scenarios to most people. We thought it was as good as Carcosa. Innsmouth's in my top 3, so I'm with you on that. When we get to Innsmouth in like 8 hours on this tier list, I'm going to be pretty high on a good chunk of the scenarios. Okay, so my normal criticisms of Miskatonic Museum is that it's kind of dull. And I think that, so I think if we can talk about the good of Dunwich and early Arkham design, where it was kind of, the scenarios were kind of like hyper fixated to challenge a specific aspect of your investigators. Versus the new kind of like the bad side of old Arkham design, which was just like, this location is bad. This is how we do it. Like we saw it in Devour Below, and it's also kind of how it works in the Miskatonic Museum, where I don't really feel like they were painting a good picture for what these museum exhibits were, right? And I think that's kind of the biggest, to me now, the biggest downside of Miskatonic Museum is that it's lacking the flavor to make it really cool. Because I think like the concept of there being this slithering hunting horror in the museum is very cool, and I like the kind of idea behind the one enemy sort of thing. Because if your fighter can get bored, but I think that's really only a true criticism for the blind play. If you're playing Dunwich and you're choosing to play Dunwich and you don't prepare for Miskatonic Museum as the fighter, like, that's on you, brother. Like, I totally think that's a fair criticism for the blind play. But this scenario ranking isn't for the blind play. I've played Miskatonic Museum probably like 80 to 100 times at this point in my life, right? So it's like one of those things where, like, I personally can't fault it for that because I kind of view it more as me. But I think that there's not really enough to really kind of make this super duper interesting. But I think before I had it, I don't like playing it at all. But I had fun playing it yesterday. I don't look forward to playing the Miskatonic Museum, but I do think that there are some big faults. But I think for me, like Devour Below, it's kind of coming on the location cards. It's interesting to see what changes from one year to the next. Is there a shorter scenario in Arkham? Yeah, I think Essex County Express is usually the scenario that I win the quickest. or lose the quickest, but usually win. The train scenario. I think that this is a great scenario. I think Essex County Express is a really, really good scenario in terms of, again, hyper-fixating on one thing to challenge your investigators with, which is, can you go fast? Can you not set up for a million turns and actually just go, 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 go? Because that is what Essex County Express brings to you. There are some design errors on higher player counts where you could just end up losing the scenario on the first or second Mythos phase. It can happen. It sucks when it happens, and I think it is an artifact of bad design, right? I feel like they fixed that in the Return to, but I feel like they could have done a little bit more in like the original sort of Arkham. Like, I feel like this scenario probably would not be worse if there was no Ancient Evils, right? If there was no Ancient Evils in here, I think that the scenario would probably be the same, because the cultists kind of act as the Ancient Evils, but you have like a turn to act on the cultists, but you don't have a turn to act on the Ancient Evils. I think that would have been a good choice. But I think that's me looking at like the higher player count experience. It's always a tense scenario. I was playing with a patron yesterday. We were doing some recording, and they told me that their watch alerted them to be like, "Are you stressed right now? Your heart rate is higher than normal." And I think that Essex County Express is a perfect example of what Arkham is capable of in terms of actually eliciting a stress response from the players. Because I'm always stressed for like the first 3 or 4 rounds of Essex County Express, especially depending on the opening scenario. And I think that's a testament to a well-designed Arkham experience. And I like Essex County Express. And the numbers on those exhausted guys are high, man. They have 5 and 4, like 4 attack, 5 health. They are really, really, really good. Blood on the Altar. I like this scenario, but I don't know if I like it as much as I did in previous years. And I think the reason for that, I love the thematic flavor of this scenario. Like, I love all that design. But I think that, to me, Blood on the Altar kind of has started to go down on the list just because I win the scenario in, like, the first 3 rounds, or I've, like, lost the scenario just due to, like, a bad RNG shuffle. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't really get to experience the flavor in the same way anymore, so it kind of leaves me wanting a little bit, right? It's one of those things where, like, I still think it's, like, a great scenario thematically, and the flavor is really cool. Like, I can't even tell you how much I love the idea of finding the key, finding the hidden door. If you find one before the other, right? Like, it's like that story that tells. Like, that's, to me, that is my favorite part of Arkham. The story that the gameplay can tell, right? And Blood on the Altar does it, like, as one of the best, in my opinion. But I think that as a whole, the gameplay of the scenario has kind of dropped a bit. Again, I'm kind of hyper-fixating on the locations for this year's tier lists. But, like, the locations are kind of, they leave me wanting, right? Like, they're lacking that little bit of oomph to really, like, tell me why this location is doing this, rather than just being like, this is like a cycle of a design where it's bad and bad things happen, right? But why are those bad things happening? Where's the resonance for why these bad things are happening? And I think that as a whole, that's really dropped on Blood of the Altar for me, dropping it down to great. Undimensioned and Unseen. Now, this is like the inverse, where this one just kind of keeps going up. I actually like Undimensioned and Unseen now. I enjoy playing it. It's no joke. Like, hand to God, hand on my heart. This is the scenario that I am most excited about when I play Dunwich Legacy. This is the scenario I am most interested in playing the campaign for. And I, can't believe I'm saying that. I'm going to be real with all of you. Like, I don't believe it, but it's true. This is the scenario that I actually have looked forward to playing the most in all of my runs of Dunwich Legacy. And I'm just being true to all of you. I'm not trying to be contrarian. I'm not trying to go with the wave. I mean, it only isn't just good, but I mean, that is kind of contrarian to the general consensus of the Arkham community. But I love the challenge that this scenario brings. So going back to like the other thing I really like about Arkham is how it challenges my decks. And I am really interested in how my deck will handle the challenges of Undimensioned and Unseen. For people who say they don't like it, I'm not here to convince you to like it, because I understand why you don't. I was one of you once. I was there. I get it. But these days, I actually have a good time playing Undimensioned and Unseen. I don't think I don't think that it's like ever going to be in my favorite scenarios, but I do legitimately like playing it. I do have a good time playing it now, which is crazy. Again, I think that there's someone in the YouTube chat saying that like it's bad on balance. I agree to an extent, but probably not for like the way of like, I like that it makes you use your willpower. Like I like that it makes you use your brain to solve problems. I think that that's actually really cool and very flavorful. I wish that the tools were better to let players adapt to it, right? But I think that it's, again, I like it when there's kind of like the laser focused on like, here we're going to challenge it. There's a comment here that says Dunwich is great because the sharp bits haven't been sanded off. Undimensioned is a particularly sharp bit. I think that's a great description of Undimensioned and Unseen and the Dunwich Legacy campaign. Again, this has kind of come from my concept of this is on like, these are not blind plays. I'm not rating these on like my first thought on these. This is the tier list here for scenarios is kind of like an ever growing, ever expanding living tier list that I revisit every year as we can see how things have changed over the years, which honestly could be a pretty good video to do. That's the way. So yeah, Undimensioned and Unseen. Where Doom Awaits is actually, it's got to be one of my least favorite scenarios in all of Arkham, just because it is impossibly dull, right? Like, it's impossibly boring. There's just, like, no cool hook to this damn scenario. I'll take a scenario that is, I mean, we just saw, that's, like, not great and the design is a little bit shaky, if that scenario is trying to do something very cool. And I think that ultimately Where Doom Awaits is doing fucking nothing. It's just doing nothing at all, man. Like, it's not really particularly challenging. Its Mythos deck is so big, so it doesn't really feel very focused or uniform. These locations that are, like, altered or not altered are just kind of like, what the fuck does that even mean, right? So I think that I want to stop talking about this one because there's not much I want to say. Lost in Time and Space is going to be in one of these two tiers. I just need to see how I'm feeling about it. What I love about Lost in Time and Space, before we put it anywhere, is that I love the mechanical simplicity for the scenario, right? Like, especially in comparison to certain finales that we get now, where the approach is kind of like, give me more, we need more on top of this, give me this mechanic, but make it more, right? It's kind of really cool that there is a final scenario that is just shuffle the deck and set aside Yog-Sothoth, right? Like, set aside, like, one extra location in Yog-Sothoth. I think that's like, that deserves so much like commendation, right? For like how that actually, like how that's possible. Cause that's crazy, especially now when, again, we look at the finale as like, and just like, there's never been a finale that's been as simple as the setup of this one. And I think that that's kind of like, I'd be curious to see if the designers took this as like a challenge where it was like, can we design a final scenario that doesn't just have like has to be the biggest because it's the finale, right? And I think that that's something that Lost in Time and Space did, where rather than being like, this is the finale, we need to make it flashy, it was just like, here's our mechanic, how do we integrate it well? And the way it worked out was just like, oh shit, we can just keep this super bare bones. And I think Lost in Time and Space is really good for that. It has some really hard encounter cards that can just cause you to lose a campaign, so it's always a little bit tense. I think it's an amazing scenario. I think it's really, really good. Oh my god, okay, we're 35 minutes into the video, and we're only on Path to Carcosa. Alright, Path to Carcosa, still probably my favorite campaign. I love the scenarios. I think they're very replayable. I think that it's fun to purposely choose to make different decisions for each of my playthroughs of it. I think there's a lot to love in Carcosa. I think the theming is very good. I think like there's really only one scenario that's kind of a snoozer, and everything else is kind of like fine to good. So I think that this is a great campaign. Starting with Curtain Call, this is probably, again, still one of my favorite openers. I'm going to put it in the amazing category because I don't think it's one of the best. I like that Big Butt Baby, the Royal Emissary. If you're new here, I've had some comments recently being like, I don't get your all your in-jokes. Big Butt Baby is the Royal Emissary. Now you're caught up. Big Butt Baby is a great recurring enemy because, one, he's hideous, two, he's a baby, and he has a big butt. Well, also because his mouth looks like a butthole. That's why I called him that back in the day. But what's really cool about him is that like he's actually like a easy guy, but he also has still a lot of risk associated with him, right? He's a 4/4/2, I believe, with Retaliate. Like that's a pretty big number, and it like deals horror no matter what, right? Like it's one of those things where it's one of those things where it's like you kind of always need to be aware of him. And even if you're with a deck that is very powerful or can get attacked a lot, getting attacked way too much by this guy can be really bad. I do love that this was like the first scenario that also played with the idea that Doom never went away, right? Like that Doom works differently in Path to Carcosa, and they kind of repeat on that every few scenarios, which I think is really neat. Great map, great concept. Curtain Call is just a banger. I do wish the second half of it, or I guess like the last third, was a little bit more inspired than just, there's goo everywhere. I wish that like instead they did something a little bit more engaging than like just like, ooh, there's fire, there's vines, there's goo, there's water, right? Like, I think that that's just a little bit... They could have just, honestly, they could have just had it be fire and, like, not done what they did. Maybe throw in, like, 2 extra encounter cards or, like, something else. I don't know. The Last King. Yo, this scenario is also amazing. It's a banger scenario, brothers. The house party. All the stuff. So I love the scenarios that kind of just, this actually reminds me a lot of House Always Wins, right? The thing I was talking about where it's like, how do I get clues? Me Rex Murphy, me got high book, how me get clues? Me Mandy Thompson, me Daisy Walker, how me get clues? Well, you got to go actually mingle with the people. You have to interact with the scenario mechanic, right? That's one of those things where Last King does it very well, where it has like that tableau set up at the start. You see where all the guests are, and on repeated plays, you can be like, ooh, that's nice. We got this player here. We got this guest here. We got this guest here, right? I think that that is a really cool mechanical concept that kind of comes into play here. The guests flipping over to start getting angry is really neat, right? Like there's some really tough encounter cards here, like the Maniac and the Young Psychopath are unassuming until suddenly they aren't. The cockroaches being there to like, you know, depend on the shroud that you're there, the one central location that is easy to move through but can get really bad, right? Like it's damn cool, man. It's a damn good scenario. I don't really have any like noted pointed criticism on it. Because even when they start turning into crazy guests, right? Like I think that that's that's kind of like cool. Even if you get the one that you don't want, like you're almost interviewing, but suddenly they shift. I think that this is like The Last King has that kind of built-in replayability. That's why Path to Carcosa is always engaging for me, is because it is because of like these small little just variants can really make a scenario feel engaging from one play to the next. Echoes of the Past is fine. It's just boring. Like, that's its biggest sin, right? Like, Echoes of the Past, it's like, it's not really like, it's not really a bad scenario, right? Like, it's just boring, right? And like, I'm not saying it's boring thematically. I think like the scenarios are like the location is very cool. Like the exploring the historical society, right? Like I think I think flavorfully that works really well. The Doom mechanic is there, right? It's one of those things where, yeah, like I think that the balance is a little bit off, and I think that that's kind of like the sticking point that comes with it. And I think that's where like the boring really comes from, is because most of the time you're able to stabilize, and if you stabilize, you've won the scenario, so then it's kind of just like going through it. However, I will say for Echoes of the Past, one of the things that is a real big sticking point for me for Echoes of the Past that I've been enjoying recently is that whenever I play a challenge run, it pops off in Echoes of the Past because you have so much time to set everything up. Unspeakable Oath. Still probably, like, in my opinion, the best scenario in Arkham, but probably not, like, the best in terms of, like, playing it. But I think it's like the best in terms of what it can elicit, the feelings that come from it. Also, like the design of everything in this scenario, it just fucking sings. Like I could talk, I mean I have talked about this scenario so goddamn much over the years. But this is like a perfect storm of like mechanical decisions coming together in a way that like both like mechanically and thematically, they just like push everything up, right? The locations tell a great story, right? The map layout tells a great story, right? I think that's one of those things that is like the biggest part of Unspeakable Oath that I think does a lot of heavy lifting that players don't really comprehend. But the layout for the map is such an important part of the design of this scenario. There are so many dead ends, but also like up is safety, down is bad, right? And it kind of has that, like that verticality that comes into it in a lot of this campaign that I think is really neat. You have some setup time before things start going too crazy, but things kind of like escalate and get worse as it goes because the monsters start showing up. And then like how this scenario leads to such a desperate desire to escape the asylum is incredible. And not even to mention the great twist of all of Arkham where you can get locked in the asylum if you lose. Incredible. Amazing scenario. Absolutely killer. Phantom of Truth. I think it's good. I think it's a good scenario. I like playing it. I love the organist. It's kind of is like Echoes of the Past, where it can be a little bit boring, but I think that flavorfully it kind of makes up for it. I think the scenarios try to do a good job of telling a story, and I think they succeed for the most part. I like the map layout. I think the map layout's really neat and engaging, especially for like. I think that there has to be like extra thought into. I'm just kind of like doing the map. These are the two in the corner. This goes like that. This goes like this, right? The concept of having to survive and be chased. I think the map does very well for that. I like the Byakis. Again, like the Byaki enemies can actually like really matter. I don't know what it is about Old Arkham versus New Arkham, where I'm less scared of the enemies in New Arkham, even if the numbers are kind of similar, right? Because, like, the Byakis are pretty relatively easy enemies, right? But there's one with, like, 5 fist, right? It has, like, 5 attack, and, like, it has, like, 2 evade, but it loses when you evade it. I feel like the enemies were just, like, designed tighter in older Arkham, while, like, the treacheries were I don't know. It's a weird thing to say, but, like, maybe I need to, like, actually dive in and see if I'm actually feeling this, or if I just... Because I can't think of, like, enemies in New Arkham that scare me the way, like, Byaki's Avian Thralls did, right? Or, like, the Yithians in, like, the Starlight Seekers in Lost in Time and Space. What's a scary recent enemy in Arkham? The only one I can really think of is, like, the Persistent Construct in Drowned City. I think that design was really stellar as an enemy that's actually scary. But I can't think of another one. Weird. But yeah, I think it's a good scenario. It's not great. It's like, it's on the edge of fine. It's on the edge of fine. Pallid Mask, yeah, this scenario is also amazing. This has that, like, quiet replayability that Path to Carcosa has, where there's the fact that, the map changes each time you play it, but it's while you're playing it, right? Like, especially, like, this kind of reminds me of, like, Lost in Time and Space, but more open, where the map is kind of evolving through the scenario in a way that's just, like, you can have every time you play the Pallid Mask, it's going to be different than the time you played before it, just due to the way that, like, you're dealing random cards out of the location deck, which means that your layout's going to be different. We've had some where Preston likes to go up. We've had one which is, like, this winding corridor that goes all the way to the end, right? Like, we have some that's kind of just like a grid system by the end of it, and I think that that's, like, really cool. The Spectre of Death is neat. The locations themselves do a really good job of painting the picture of what you're doing. Just an all-around amazing scenario. Black Star's Rise is good. I think it's good. I own the game. I've only played the intro scenario, but wanted to dig in more. Would you recommend? What would I recommend, or just would I recommend playing more Arkham? Because I've played a lot of Arkham, and I'll tell you right now, yes, I always recommend people play Arkham. The app? Well, there's no app that lets you play Arkham, right? It's just like, there's the kind of that stuff that is, unless you're talking about Tabletop Simulator, in which case it's a great way to play the old campaigns that are now out of print. It's a great way to do that. But there's no, like, app to play Arkham Horror, the card game. Where are we? Black Star's Rise. I think that I like this. I like the risk associated with it. I like the scenarios. The locations in the scenario. I think the enemies are kind of leaving me wanting more in this scenario. I like how they explore. I like how we explore the 2 different agendas. I think that's a really cool thing where it's like, it sets a good scene, and again, it explores Doom in a way that's different than Arkham as we've come to know it up to this point. But I think that, like, the idea of finding the right path leads me to ultimately just kind of view this one as more of a chore. You know what? I'm going to put this one down here. I'm going to put this one down here this year. I think that I think my stonks are dropping on Black Star's Rise. And I think I kind of like it less than Echoes of the Past in some ways, which is strange, but I'm just following my heart of hearts. Is TTS like the King in Yellow? Not to be mentioned? I mean, I hope not. I release videos in it. Like, I'm not here to help you find it, but I do use it. That's kind of like my thought process on it. I do like the scaling treacheries. I think those are actually some of the strongest treacheries in terms of nuking you as a player in the game. I think that's a great shout out. Overall, I'm going to just call this one as just fine, though. I don't really know why. Going on that enjoyment, I just don't enjoy playing it. I think Dim Carcosa is a great finale. I like playing it. I have a hard time winning it with 2 players. Actually, have a pretty low success rate lately. 3 or 4 players is no problem, but I think it demands a lot, and it can really kind of like spiral out of control pretty quick. I like the layout of the map. I think the scenarios are thematic. I think like kind of like the veiled mechanic without being veiled was very cool, right? I think that, I mean, was it actually called veiled? I don't remember. But I think that like being able to look at the locations is really hype, is really cool storytelling stuff, and I love when they do that, and I wish they did it more, right? Yeah, I think overall Dim Carcosa is a great finale, but not nearly as high as Lost in Time and Space. I think that Lost in Time and Space is probably one of the best finales that we've had. I think Dim Carcosa is also still relatively simple in its setup, which I like, and we're going to see it slowly creep and be less and less simple as we go from here, right? Okay. This is going to be a long video. Buckle up, everybody. We're about an hour in, and we're only on Forgotten Age. So, Forgotten Age, great scenario, a great campaign on repeated plays. Very hard blind play scenario. I think it's a rite of passage to restart a Forgotten Age campaign at least once in your life. Very tough campaign, very fun campaign. A lot of experience. So, if you like XP, you might not get that on your blind play, but you'll get it on future ones, and it's very good for that. Overall, though, there are some bangers, and there are probably some of the biggest stinkers, in my opinion. So, Untamed Wilds, opening scenario here. I think that this is a great opening scenario. It's very tough. It's very spooky. The snakes that poison you are super duper scary, right? The Ancient Evil's design mishap is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is at this point. You kind of just have to accept it. Got very lucky in my most recent play of it when Daniel and I were playing with Carson and Silas, where we actually didn't see like any Ancient Evils before the reshuffles, which, I mean, that's more likely to happen in 2 players than in 3 or 4 players, but it was a nice way to play it. Forgotten Age kind of changes a lot, where the campaign becomes easier if you kind of shift your perspectives of what victory is, like what winning a scenario means, right? And I think that Untamed Wilds, to me, it became a lot easier to manage when I won the scenario if no one was poisoned, and I got victory on the Runes of Etzli, right? Like, that to me was, it made it an easier scenario to approach and ultimately let me enjoy it more, because that is a more realistic path of victory. By the way, this Shistaka art is actually, it goes fucking hard. That's some great art from the artist who did that. Just looking at the little icon there. Yeah, great scenario. I like how it teaches you that this campaign is going to be different than Dunwich and Carcosa, so prepare accordingly for that. The Doom of Etzli. I think that this scenario is only... it's one of these two. It's kind of in between them. I think it's just fine. I don't think it's a bad scenario by any means. I just, like, don't look forward to playing it. And I'm trying to put into words why that is. And I can't really find them. But it really comes down to the idea that I just don't think it's particularly enjoyable to play. It's kind of just a bad... It's kind of just like a bad cave diving experience. I think that, like, exploring the cave is a lot less engaging than it was in Untamed Wilds. I think exploring the jungle is really cool. I think exploring the cave, it doesn't really resonate with me. I like the escape at the end. I think the escape at the end is my favorite part of the scenario, but it's really like lacking that oomph in the opening, like 80% of it for me to really like it. I find I'm better at managing the Harbinger, which does a lot to make me kind of like survive it more, but I don't know. I can't really put it into words why I don't like the Doom of Etsley, but I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan right now. I don't like it. Like, I don't hate it. I don't think it's annoying, but I don't like it. So I'm just going to put it in fine. Because I think it's fine to play, but I don't know. There's just something about it. I can't... Bad criticism on my part. I can't really put into words, but I'm just not popping with Doom of Etsley. Threads of Fate. I think I'm going to drop this one down this year to Amazing. I'm kind of tired on it after playing it as many times as I have. That I think that the reason why Midnight, because like Threads of Fate and Midnight Masks are kind of cut from the same cloth, right? Where it's like you're in Arkham and there is a variable set amount of goals that you need to complete, and they might show up in different ways. But the reality is that Midnight Masks, while it's simpler in its goals, is a little bit more open than Threads of Fate in terms of its goals. Threads of Fate is actually kind of on the rails for me now, where like I've played enough that I've seen all of the pieces and all the ways that this can go, and it doesn't really spark that sort of like joy that it used to for me, because I was like, okay, we go here, we get the clues off this location, we do this, we do that, here's the Black Cave sometimes. Alejandro, that idiot, got tied to some train tracks, as he often does. So it's kind of like one of those things where I know what happens. And I know there's one of those things where, like, Midnight Mask, it's like, oh, look, Wolfman Drew is downtown again. That's where he always is, right? But there's the difference between the fact that, like, when I know I advance this act in Threads of Fate, I know I'm probably going to deal with this lady at this location, right? But with Midnight Masks, I have a 20% chance of hitting Wolfman Drew, right? And like just even the fact of which cultist you hit when does a lot to really add to the replayability. I still think Threads of Fate is mechanically one of the best, but I think for me personally this year I'm dropping it down to Amazing. Boundary Beyond is a good scenario. I like it. I think that it's a good time. It really changed a lot for me when I realized, hey, what if I just changed my perspective on what a victory was, right? So, like, I used to be like, I didn't get all 6, I've lost. But to me now, a victory in Boundary Beyond is earning Ishtaka's trust, right? Which needs you to get 3 boundaries, which I think is very doable and ultimately leads to a really good, a more manageable play of Heart of the Elders Part 1. I do like how difficult Boundary Beyond is. This and Undimensioned and Unseen have actually grown a lot for me over the years. So I think that is really neat to kind of see where it's like, oh, I've kind of the perspective on these change over time. And someone did shout it out earlier, but Clutches of Chaos might be following a similar sort of path for me as a player. I think Boundary Beyond is very memorable because it is so difficult. I think there are some weird things. I think there are some mechanics that are a little bit kind of shit in this scenario, like when certain locations come into play, how people can just like lose their entire turns. I think that is just a little bit like lazy punishment design from the designers, but overall I think it is a good scenario. Heart of the Elders Part 1 is actually probably my least favorite scenario in all of Arkham. I just don't think it's good. I actually think, like, you know how I said I don't think there's, like, bad scenarios because, you know, like, everything is hugs and kisses? I think that Heart of the Elders Part 1 is the worst scenario in Arkham, and I think it's actually the only scenario that I would call bad. I think that the idea for this scenario was like the idea of like having the serpent chase you was good enough for its own thing. Like that could have been something that they could have explored in a way that was differently, maybe used the explore mechanic differently, right? Like I think that there was a lot of really cool potential there that I think unfortunately they just like didn't really take advantage of. So I think that ultimately Heart of the Elders Part 1 I think is just bad. I'm going to be putting like put it over here because it's also not particularly engaging. The idea that like going into it you're like, ooh, odds are we're going to have to replay it, or alternatively you can just like cheese it and just roll until you get the perfect mulligan, right? And like that's kind of shit. It's kind of shit. Heart of the Elders Part 2 is certainly not like that much better. Sorry, that much. It's not worse, but it's not like leagues better, but it is better than Heart of the Elders Part 1. I think a big thing is that it's, again, these are like two halves of a scenario, right? Like a Part 1 and a Part 2, and they're kind of just like, they're not really like leaving a big mark for themselves. As Travis would often say, that it's kind of just like a worst Untamed Wilds and a worst Doom of Etsley, because you're kind of like repeating the same like story beats over and over and over again. And I think that that's actually like a pretty apt description for Heart of the Elders Part 1 and Part 2. Like this one's not bad, and I'll play it and like have an okay time playing it, but I'm not really looking forward to playing Heart of the Elders Part 2. This is a campaign that's really brought on by its highs, as you can kind of just see how there is for like this, right? Like, not looking that great. I mean, we also have, like two of these guys hanging out here. It's kind of cool seeing how they all go. Man, this Carcosa is pretty good on its high end. City of Archives, I think that this is a good scenario. I don't want to talk too much about City of Archives because I actually just released an entire video breaking it down. For me personally, I enjoy the puzzle that this scenario presents to you as a player. How are you going to solve becoming a Yithian? How are you going to change your evaluation of the cards in your hand versus what you would do with them normally versus what you should actually be doing them to win the scenario? I think that that is really cool and really fun, but overall it's definitely lost a little bit of its real big excitement as we've gotten more and more plays of City of Archives under the belt for me personally. Depths of Yoth is one of the best. That's one of the best scenarios in all of Arkham. It's up here, like, these three were like the big heavy hitters for a long time, and they still kind of are, like, heavy fucking hitters. Like, they are... That was a weird-ass bird. Did you guys hear that shit? But Depths of Yoth is, like, stellar. And I think a big reason for this is just that it explored the explore mechanic differently. And I know it didn't, right? Because you're going to say, but Justin, it's still just the same thing. You just use the action to get the explore card and you go through this. But what it did was, it's like, what if we took the explore deck and made it repeat itself, right? But like, what if also then because of that, there were no treachery? So it was like the first time of the entire fucking campaign where explore felt different. And you were like, oh, thank God, right? Like, I actually can interact with it. I can have fun with it. I can actually, like, look at this mechanic that you have here and not try to, I don't need to analyze it or game it or all that kind of stuff that I'm forced to do because the Explore deck is so brutal that you're able to do that. I think that ultimately there's a lot of room for improvement for Explore, but I think that Depths of Yoth is... The reason why, part of the reason why it is so good is because it actually uses the mechanic differently. So I think that I wish there was more, again, I'm going to say exploration of the Explorer deck to kind of give you a reason to like engage with the mechanic. And I think that Depths of Yoth is really good for that. Pursuit Area is very good. They used it multiple times. And it's just like, the enemies are really cool. It just comes it comes and it pops and it's killer. Shattered Aeons. I don't like this finale at all. I think that this is like one of the 2 finales that I actually don't like playing. Because it kind of just feels like nothing to me, right? Like, I don't like it. I don't think it's particularly challenging anymore. I think that the going into random dimensions is cool, but like I get what they were going for, right? Where the idea of this like pulpy action movie this pulpy adventure movie comes to a climax where it's like, oh, you need to explore these dimensions that are like shattering before you. You need to like put it all back together. I think that in theory that concept is really cool, but it doesn't really like come across with everything else that was set up before it. It kind of reminds me of the Circle Undone ending, where it's like you're doing all this stuff and then suddenly Azathoth is here, you know? And I think that like obviously it was signposted from the beginning, but from like a storytelling mechanic, it leaves a little bit on the table. But I think, like, for me, the big thing is just the gameplay loop of Shattered Aeons is, the gameplay loop of Shattered Aeons is kind of just, like, kind of just crap. That's, like, I think the big thing for me. Where it's not really, didn't have enough of a ramp. You take that out of your mouth. You take the RAMP out of your mouth. There's just the gameplay mechanically, I'm just like, there's not a big enough hook for me to actually enjoy it. No shade if you do enjoy it, because I don't think it's bad. It's just like, for me, I find it to be a little bit lackluster. I think I'm going to put it up in fine, though, because I think it's kind of on par with these. I think I'm going to bump it up a bit. Because I think it doesn't deserve to be with Miskatonic Museum. I'd rather play Shattered Aeons than Miskatonic Museum, so we're going to run with that. Okay, Circle Undone. Circle Undone it's not my least favorite campaign anymore. There is a new front runner for that. We're going to get to that one later. You know what it is if you know me. But for me, with Circle Undone has some incredible treachery design. I think that there is a lot of really cool design in terms like of the mechanical part of this campaign. So much so that I think that mechanically the design of Circle Undone is easily the best that we have seen in all of Arkham. I'm going to just say this all right now. Even more than Carcosa. I think that like the conceptual mechanical design of Circle Undone is very, very good, if not the best. However, for me personally, I just don't like any of the scenarios that much. I don't think there's that many stinkers in the campaign, but I think that just overall, none of the hooks in Circle Undone really pull me in, right? Whether it be in the woods, in the Silver Twilight Lodge, in Rat Heaven, right? Back with the heretics, right? In the Silver Twilight Lodge again. On the Unvisited Isle. I forgot that one even existed for a second. In the Clutches of Chaos, before the Black Throne, right? Like, there's just like, there's not many that really make me go, oh, I can't fucking wait to play that scenario. They just don't resonate with me. And I think it's a shame because I think, again, the mechanical identity of this campaign is very good. I think the mechanical identity is very strong. But I think that, like, the story identity and the scenario identity is a little bit lackluster in this campaign. So, just setting the scene, because these ones are going to kind of be on the lower end. Witching Hour, I think, is a good opening scenario. I like that it splits you up, right? I like that it asks you as a player to kind of like make the best of how are you able to survive like alone. Are you going to be able to actually like get stuff done, right? Like I think that that's a really cool thing. And it kind of is setting this idea where, hey, you better get ready to do this for the entirety of the campaign, because we're going to try to separate you as much as we can, or alternatively, if you are not separating, you are going to have a bad time. And I think that that is a really cool design signpost that they had at the beginning, and they carried it through the entire campaign. Again, I think Circle Undone is phenomenal. Its mechanical design, but I think its thematic design and its scenarios leave a little to me wanting more. And The Witching Hour is good, but I think it's, like, to me, one of the better of the scenarios in the campaign. So if it's only good, that's a little bit poopy. I don't like the climax of this scenario compared to some of the other opening scenarios, right? Like, I think it's lacking a little bit of spice for me to really get there. I do like that it's difficult, but what was I going to say? I like that it's difficult, but I don't like how it's difficult, if that makes sense. And I'm not talking about, like, the requires you to split up or kind of thing. I just think a lot of the difficulty comes entirely to... I think it's kind of like a more RTD, a little bit more roll the dice difficulty. That's a great point about Circle Undone. Yeah, you can just, like, there's not much mechanical complexity that comes with it, like, in terms of, like, the grand picture. And I think that's something that we saw in a lot of this, right? Like, in what we've seen so far, there's not really, like, a crazy mechanical hook that really drags you in. You can kind of just, like, play them, right? I think that's really going to start changing once we get to... I mean, even not so much Innsmouth, right? You also can just play Innsmouth. I know people will talk about the upgrading thing, but I actually think it's not that big of a deal. But I do think coming, Edge of the Earth, there's kind of always been, like, a hook for the campaign that's kind of more meta. And Circle Undone, you can just play Circle Undone, and that's a great point. Witching Hour, good scenario, though. At Death's Doorstep has gotten a lot worse for me as I've gotten more plays of it. I don't think it's a bad scenario. I'm going to put it in the fine tier just because I think it is just fine. But I think the big problem for me personally with At Death's Doorstep is that, like, what is it about, right? Like, what's it really about? What's it doing? What story is it trying to tell? And is it doing it in a way that's interesting? And the story is that you are in the scenario and you are playing, and then, like, the ghosts start attacking the Silver Twilight Lodge, right? And I think that for me, the problem is it tells that story by putting the cards on the table. But it's not really, like, engaging enough with me as a player to make me actually feel like it's telling a story. I think, like, what I'm going to say might seem like other scenarios are doing this as well, but you have to just trust me that for me personally it isn't. Circle Undone has a lot of things that happen because the game makes it happen, right? Where those story beats are kind of just, like, so sudden and, like, happening because the card says that it doesn't feel natural in the way that other stories are told in the scenarios, right? Like the Last King, you get there, the party guest is all there. The party's already started, right? The guys are going to start flipping one by one. And it still is like one of those things where, yeah, the card is making it happen. So I'm not saying that like that's a special thing that Carcosa has over Circle Undone. But for me, it does such a good job flavorfully of telling this story that I think the Circle Undone is lacking for me personally. I think it's missing that kind of like, that spice that really makes it sing. And at this point now, I just killed Joseph Meager. Fuck that guy. The secret name. This scenario's also dropped quite a bit for me. I used to like it because I like the Brown Jenkin type thing, but I'm kind of over it at this point in my life. I just think that like what was interesting is just like not anymore. I think I still stand by my statement that the way the rats grow and how those are the only enemies in the deck, but they feel so oppressive, is still one of like the most successful mechanical designs that Arkham has ever seen. This is what I say again, that I think the mechanics of this campaign are like so fucking good. But I think that just like thematically, it leaves a lot on the table. I think this one is like, as a singular slice of a scenario, actually, that's very great, Volkloss. What I was about to say, that's very apt. So Volkloss said, I heard once it was originally developed as a standalone. Don't know if it's true, but I wonder if it'd feel that better that way. Secret Name is so good as a singular slice of a scenario. But when you look at it as the entire mechanical whole of the campaign, it's like, what the fuck am I doing here? Right? Like, why am I doing this? Oh, there's witches. We're in the witch house, right? But like, it's one of those things where it just feels like a side quest as opposed to the actual goal of the campaign and a natural progression of the story. And I think that it's one of those things where I used to be able to forgive that for me as a player because the scenario was kind of fun. But at this point now, I just don't really have as much fun with the Secret Name anymore. Wages of Sin, I'm going to put in annoying. I just don't think it's particularly enjoyable. And I have hated the mechanic of get this guy to a secret place, but you won't know what that objective is unless you look at it, or it's just you hope that it works out, but maybe it doesn't. I think that's kind of like a very strange way of going about it. I think it would be a bit more interesting if the ghosts were not on locations that were other objectives. Like, funnily enough, if the map was a little bit bigger, right? And I think that it's kind of one of those things where, like, it feels like, oh, I need the clues off of this location, but there's another heretic there, so we have to deal with that heretic, right? And I think that that is just like, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like, it's just like a ball of just like, it's kind of just like, it's kind of just the shit soup, right? I think it's just like, this is supposed to be like the hard scenario of the campaign. If you kind of notice it, there's always like a scenario that's kind of like, oh, this is the hard one, especially in the older days, right? I think that this one really, really is like the worst of the hard ones that exist. So I think that I'm going to put this one down here. And yes, I do dislike the one that says play this, but ignore the text on the other side. But there's text on that side that you have to not ignore. Answer me this, rule heads. The people who are always like, the word of Arkham is gospel. But then there's this fucking line of text that just contradicts the text on one side, and people just hand wave it and say that's how it's supposed to work, but they're not okay with just hand waving and saying that's how it's supposed to work for other shit? Explain to me that. Riddler? Riddle me this. Why the fuck does that just get a free pass from so many people? Why am I the only person who's screaming about this on the rooftops? That's fucked up. That's what it is. But no, I do agree with you saying, Stephen, that the vibes of Circle Undone are very good. I think the vibes are very good. I think there's a lot of great pieces of Circle Undone. I just think the scenarios, again, I think they're just, they lack something for me personally. For the greater good. I think the scenario is good. I think it's a good scenario. I do like how the two sides feel very different. I do enjoy the Silver Twilight Lodge actually feeling like a scary threat. I think there's a lot of good pieces of this scenario. I think it's a good one. I wish that the objective to advance at the end was a May, so you could actually spend a bit more time. But, I think that that's kind of just a little bit nitpicky for me as a player. I think the Soul Twilight Lodge, this is a lot more engaging than At Death's Doorstep. Cool use of the key mechanic.
Fatality.
Thank you for that, Goro Nadara. Thank you so much for the sub, 2 months. New tier list content, that's what I'm here for. And to talk about board games. Hell yeah. Yeah, I think that this is it's a good scenario. I think it's good. I think it's one of the ones that I actually look forward to playing. Do you mainly enjoy playing Arkham Horror solo or multiplayer? I prefer playing with other people because it is just more fun to play with other people. But I'll play two-handed solo as well. I will never play true solo. I mean, I never say never, but I don't enjoy true solo. But I'll play two-handed solo. But my preference is playing with other people because board games are more fun with other people. Union and Disillusion. I don't like playing this scenario at all. I do not like this scenario. Union and Disillusion is kind of ass. When your cool mechanic for your scenario is, what if it was a test, but bigger, right? To me, that doesn't really, do anything for me as a player, right? That's just yeah, what if it was this, but more, right? That's not really engaging for me as a player. I'm excited that, we're going to the Unvisited Isle again, right? That was in, some sort of thing. I didn't dream that. I've been having a lot of really vivid dreams lately, so I might have dreamt that we're going back to the Unvisited Isle. But I remember reading that somewhere, or I dreamt it. So, I'm hoping to maybe, if this is true, my dream wasn't just a dream, that we are going to revisit that, because I do think it'd be really cool to actually give the Unvisited Isle another shot. Because that's a classic Arkham, an Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, type location, which I want to pull that out again. Travis Byrne and I should play Arkham Horror 2nd Edition again. But yeah, I think that, this is just mechanically such a dull scenario, right? That is just, not really moving the needle for me as a player. I do, no, it is one of the things. That's probably the thing that I think is most interesting, is that you can actually win the scenario off of this. Win the whole campaign. I think that that's kind of really, really neat. I like that part of it, kind of like the campaign storytelling that comes there. I moved from true solo to two-handed recently. The enemies that get health per investigator are annoying. If you have just one fighter, now they have to do twice the work. They, in theory, have to do twice the work, But because they don't need to grab clues, they're really only doing one person's work, right? Because they don't have to do the other job. That's kind of like where the concept from the difference between true solo and two-handed comes in, where now you can start to like fixate and like focus on a power as opposed to just like trying to flex and get a little bit of everything like you have to do in true solo. If you kind of change that deck building, then it becomes a lot easier where it's like, like a fighter sees a 4 health enemy and they're like, that motherfucker is dead in 2 actions. Where like and then like they don't need to worry about anything else because the other person's grabbing the clues. It's an interesting shift, and it's part of the reason why I have a hard time for me going down to solo, because finding that balance is harder for me as a player. In the clutches of chaos. All right, this is the year where things just get weirder. We're going to put in the clutches of chaos in good this year. I'm a new guy, I guess. You know, I'm fucked up this year apparently. So I fell and hit my head. 3 scenarios that I always would rate in the bottom for various reasons, whether this be Undimensioned, Boundary, and in the Clutches of Chaos, are now all in good. That's weird. Justin, are you Justin? That's a little bit strange. Yes, I am still me as far as I know. And the reason why I've started to enjoy Clutches of Chaos, where it's kind of like Undimensioned and Unseen, where when I start playing the Circle Undone, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of into this. I'm kind of looking forward to playing in the Clutches of Chaos, which is something I never thought I would actually like kind of say. So yeah, I just, again, like Undimensioned, and to some extent Boundary Beyond, and to some extent City of Archives, I do like that in the Clutches of Chaos, asks something from you and from your deck, and it's your success in the scenario depends on how much you are willing to adapt to that change versus ignore that, like put your hands over your ears and say la 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 la, right? Like, and when you accept that change and embrace that change, it actually becomes a very fun little puzzle to solve. So I'm enjoying Clutches of Chaos, and Travis, I'll say it again, you were right. The scenario is pretty good. You got me again. However, I will go against the grain a little bit here. I'm kind of softer on Before the Black Throne than I was before. I think I used to have it in one of the best. I think I'm going to drop it down to Amazing this year. Maybe it was there last year too. That's a great piece of key art, by the way. That's some sick ass fucking art for this. But why is Before the Black Throne going down for me? I think I'm just like starting to really feel the impact that RNG has on this scenario, right? Where I think that there is a lot less control as a player over this scenario. And sometimes you win just because the way the dice are rolled. And while that ultimately is not like an absolute deal breaker for me as a player, I do think that as a whole, it does leave me wanting a little bit. I've been saying that. That's the key word of this, where it's just like, that's like the tagline of this, leaves me wanting. But this one does leave me wanting just like a bit more control over the final bit. But like, if we talk about all the variants that exist here, there is what locations you get when you try to add more to the cosmos, right? What locations are you go to in what order to find the location you need to go to? How many cultists commit ritual suicide, which is one of the most metal lines of text that Arkham has for actually embracing like the horror part of the game. And then there's also the randomness that is in every scenario, which is what treacheries do you see and when, right? And normally it's like okay to have like 2 or 3 of these things, but having like 5 different things kind of be here can really, it kind of sours it for me, where like Unspeakable Oath, it's like what monsters come up when, and I think that that is kind of like the randomness that I can take. The Depths of Yoth, what locations come out, right? I think that, like, again, because the Treachery deck is always the randomized aspect of how a scenario deals with you. So I think that just adding more randomized aspects ultimately sours it for me in the long run. I still think Before the Black Throne is a very good scenario, and I feel very accomplished when I beat it. But now when I go to Before the Black Throne, I feel less like, okay, I'm going to try to beat this, and more like, man, I hope RNG allows me to beat this, which kind of brings it down for me a little bit personally. Okay, let's run into Dream Eaters. Let's keep this going. Dream Eaters is... Dream Eaters has some highs and some lows. I don't mind the 2-deck structure because it means I gotta like play more decks. I understand why some people might find it a little bit annoying to have to like build multiple decks for this type of thing. But I like it. It just means I gotta try another Arkham deck. And it loads you with XP in the first 2 scenarios, so you're able to like achieve that Arkham deck. And I think that it is an enjoyable time. I like playing it. I think that it's a fun campaign. It's definitely not in like my top, but it's definitely far away from my bottom. Whoopsie, no, that's not, like, we have to actually talk about Beyond the Gates of Sleep. I think Beyond the Gates of Sleep is a fine opener. It's a little, so I think the biggest criticism I have for Dream Eaters as a whole, and it really like really pushes that fact here with Beyond the Gates of Sleep, where this campaign is incredibly on the rails. Even in a scenario that feels like it's open, as a whole, this campaign is very on the rails. You do this thing in this order, it always works out this way, right? It happens like this, and it'll never have variance from that. And I think that that's a big reason why I love Path to Carcosa. And while I enjoy playing Dream Eaters, it's definitely my biggest attraction from it. And I think that's why Beyond the Gates of Sleep is falling down into this fine category, because it has the same opening. You have to go down the stairs. You have to talk to the 2 old men, one of which is a pervert, by the way. Then you go down those stairs. You get to the Enchanted Woods, and you say, okay, we get our one bit of variance in this whole scenario, which is what are the locations we get there, and is there going to be a GUG, right? It's not really that engaging, and ultimately it's kind of a snooze fest of a scenario with everything else around that. I enjoy the swarming mechanic, even though, like, mechanically, it does create a lot of problems. I think that as a whole, Beyond the Gates of Sleep is just a fine opening scenario. On the inverse, Waking Nightmare is an amazing opening scenario. I think it personally might be my favorite opening scenario of all of Arkham, because I just think the vibes are immaculate and the challenge is really good. It has a very interesting sort of difficulty curve for the scenario, where it starts easy and then gets, fuck you, you're gonna die difficult, and then slowly goes back down to the beginning curve. And I think that that is such an interesting concept of design, and something that I think is very engaging to play with as a player. This one doesn't have a lot of variance, but there is a big chunk of, like, I guess it is kind of variance in terms of, like, how quick you're able to stop the infection from spreading, and if you're able to stop it from spreading to the basement. I think that that is a very fun, not funny. I think that's a very fun mechanic to play around, and adds to a lot of stress. I think if I had to give one detraction for Waking Nightmare, it comes into the fact that the spiders, the Grey Weavers that you fight in this scenario, are the hardest you're ever going to fight them for the whole campaign. But not because your deck gets better, but because they're the same motherfuckers in the final scenario. It's such a weird mechanical decision where the 2 Grey Weavers in the deck are a nightmare in Waking Nightmare, but like they're the same numbers in the final scenario. It's kind of like a byproduct of old Arkham release format where like these had to be in the core box, right, before the Mythos packs. So kind of an interesting little thing that I don't think will like really ever happen to this extent again, barring maybe Western Wall, which is interesting. Search for Kadath. This one's also kind of dropped for me. I'm going to put this one in the great tier over here. It's kind of funny that I'm having so many scenarios kind of drop this year. But I think it's just because these scenarios, they're like the ones that have been dropping a bit have kind of been lacking basically their replayability and their variants were definitely just a mask they were wearing, right? Where there's still absolutely incredible scenarios, right? Like I'm not saying that these scenarios are bad. They're very good. I love Search for Kadath. I enjoy playing it. But I think a big thing for me personally is that they're just like, there's a path I follow, and I know what that path is, and if I deviate from the path, there's not really enough there to make it particularly engaging or interesting. I'm more so just like going off the path to try something new, but it doesn't give no more variance. It just like changes how things go. So it's kind of like Threads of Fate, where Search for Kadath and Threads of Fate are both like down for a little bit for me, just due to that reason, where it's like you're kind of the same thing that I've already seen, right? And if I try to do something different, I'm actually still on the rails that were set out for me, as opposed to something like the Pallid Mask where, ooh, you know what, like this Catacomb is going to be different every time I play it. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like optimizing the fun, some of the fun out of Search for Kadath. I think it's the fact that like it doesn't fucking matter which path you go first because they're always the same. I think it's such a damn shame that the Return to boxes stopped before Dream Eaters, not because we never got it, but because I think Dream Eaters as a whole was the campaign that would have benefited the most from some variance for its locations and its enemies. I think that would have been very, very helpful to make Dream Eaters feel less like it's on the rails. 1,000 Shapes of Horror. More like 1,000 poops out my butt. I don't like this scenario. It has the same problems of all of the Dream Eater scenarios we've talked about so far, but like none of the good shit. This scenario is always the same. I do love exploring the Unnameable house, like as the Arkham location. I think that's really cool. Again, like all you second edition Boardhead fans would love. But I think the scenario is just impossibly dull. I think it's just like so goddamn boring, right? Like there's nothing like engaging about it. And then it has like one of my least favorite Arkham mechanics, which is, what if there was a second half of the scenario that was nothing like the first half of the scenario, but we had to like reset the board and go again? And like, I give some leeway in terms of like the 2 finales of Dream Eaters because they have this concept of like board 1 into board 2, right? But with all that said, it's like, these are like, it's like an intro and then the second half. With 1,000 Shapes of Horror, it's like they did and they were like, well, we're really missing like something to make this scenario like have a exciting finish, right? And I think that thematically and mechanically, it just hits the things that I don't like as a player. So I'm gonna be putting it down here. I'll put it in annoying because it's not like a bad like these scenarios. I think that these scenarios, like these 4, I would consider to be bad. I do think I'm gonna stand by like 1,000 like poops out my butt, right? But they're healthy poops, like good fiber, you know, good health biome. So we're gonna go with like that. The finales are like, here's the prologue, and here's the real scenario where shapes is more. You thought you were done, but surprise, here's a staircase. 100%. 100%. Dark Side of the Moon. There's a moon lizard in this scenario, so it can't be bad. I always think of Astute when I play this scenario because apparently he has the worst luck in the world with this one. But, like, you just evade the Cats of Saturn, right? Then they go away. They just die slowly, right? That's my thought anyway. I think a big thing about this one is I think the flavor is really cool. I love the locations. I love how there's a Temple of the Moon Lizard and then there's actually a moon lizard. I like how you go from the dark side to the light side, right? I like that there is the cool finish with the guy who's like, you could not step on my ship unless your alarm level is lower than this threshold. But it's so on the rails. And I think that unfortunately the scenarios and counter deck is a little bit too swingy, where it either does nothing or it does everything. So I think that that's a pretty big knock against the scenario for me personally. But overall, I can't really fault it too much. I enjoy playing it. I like the Moon Lizard. That's that. Point of No Return featuring Delilah O'Rourke. I should really change this one. That's not a good picture for Point of No Return. This is back when I actually just used the covers from the boxes. I should really go and redo those with some of like the modern Arkham square stuff that I do. I'm going to put Point of No Return in good as well. I might put it in fine. But I have been enjoying it more. But I think it's such a weird... It's so on the rails, right? Yeah, Richard Pickman art for this for sure. Yeah, 100%. But like this one is so on the rails that like it has like these 3 spots you visit. And like that's neat. And like they each have like these 3 spots that are kind of cool and they're all like kind of memorable. There's like the Gug City, there's the Dole Diggin', and then there's like the Sea of Pitch at the bottom. And like that actually does tell a really cool story. But it's so on the rails and I don't know if it's doing anything like particularly interesting. I think I'm going to put it in good though, over fine. Yeah, I think so. I think so. All right, we're going to do these 2 together for both Where the Gods Dwell and Weaver of the Cosmos because they're actually incredibly similar. And I'm going to put both. I think they're both great finales. I think they're fun to play. I think they are the best actualized version of a quote-unquote boss monster, right? Where, like, they feel very video gamey. And I remember I've had that thought for a very long time where I was like, these feel like big video game bosses for, like, 2 different games. Where, like, in Where the Gods Dwell, it was very, like, psychological horror game, right? Where you're fighting the boss in your head. And then, like, the Weaver of the Cosmos is like, ooh, here's the big monster, like Monster Hunter, we're shooting its legs off. Or, like, Dark Souls, we're dodge rolling, right? And I think that that's something they haven't really hit again until the Drowned City. I think that one also feels very video gamey. So I think that that's like a pretty good accomplishment for the design. I don't like the shift from like one part to the other. Again, that's kind of like my own personal pet peeve for this kind of thing. But as a whole, I can't really fault it too much because I think that, again, like as you said, Volcalos, it's kind of like prologue and real scenario. I think it's less appealing on Weaver of the Cosmos, but I think the pacing is important there. I think Weaver of the Cosmos is a little bit too easy. What's stopping these from being amazing is the fact that they're so on the rails again. Dream Eaters is just a horribly on the rails campaign to a fault. So I think that that's just something that at this point now is kind of just unavoidable. And it's never going to change because it's out of print and dead. I mean, like, I know Dare BK was working on a return to of this. I wonder what that could be done to just even make new scenarios, like new locations for scenarios. But I do think that overall, I imagine that the reason why there isn't as much variance is because they are so, again, they're just so on the rails. They happen with these story beats at these moments, and you have to follow them, and that's just how it's designed. And I agree. Dream Eaters is a campaign that really suffers on replays. That even in the way that, even though I'm not a fan of Circle Undone, I would rather, as a whole, play that one for the variance compared to Dream Eaters most of the time. Dream Eaters is probably my least replayed campaign just because it is the least appealing to replay. All right, into the Innsmouth Conspiracy, which I really like this scenario. I think I said, what is it, like 3 hours ago that we would finally talk about Innsmouth Conspiracy when it was like in my top 3. So I'm not gonna bury the lead. He says hour 45 into the video. We have my top 3 are Carcosa, Hemlock, and Innsmouth. Those are like probably my 3 favorite scenarios. And I think they're very, very good campaigns. I keep mixing up campaigns and scenarios. I'm like in computer where I have like the last line of logic loaded and I'm just like repeating that line of logic again. But the scenarios in Innsmouth Conspiracy, there are some that I would call are like a little bit stinky, but as a whole, there's a lot that I really enjoy about the Innsmouth Conspiracy. And even if there are some that are, I think, are just a little bit more dull, I think there's a lot of really good pieces in this. Pit of Despair is the opener. I think it's an amazing opening scenario. I think it does a lot to challenge the players. I think the biggest fault I have with the Pit of Despair is that we can all agree that the first scenarios are very important, right? Like they're a very important scenario to do well on, right? We can all agree that because it's kind of like the foundation for setting your deck up for success, right? But a big problem with Innsmouth Conspiracy and like Pit of Despair in general is due to the weird pacing and how this one works. The fact that if you do bad in Pit of Despair, it's going to matter for more than just the experience in your deck. It's going to matter for the tokens that are in the Chaos bag, right? Because you get to remove symbol tokens if you do better. And not being able to get those, it really makes this scenario that much more important. However, with all that said, I actually think it's pretty easy to get all those if you're a more experienced player like I am. So it's kind of like not really coming into my logic for these decisions too much for me personally. But I think it is a fair point of criticism for the scenario. I like how it has like a Pallid Mask style map spreading thing, so it always feels slightly different every time you play it. Turns out when maps kind of just generate randomly like that, it's very good for replayability. I think the Amalgam is fine. I actually think the scenario would have been fine without the Amalgam, to be honest with all of you. It's kind of just there. I think just having like the deep ones kind of be the interesting piece is like the interesting part. Especially because the Amalgam never like shows up again. Like maybe if the Amalgam showed up again in a later scenario, like then yeah, I could see a reason why he's there, but it's just like, oh, he's Thomas Dawson. Woo, you know? Yeah, so I think that's kind of the thing, but it's an amazing scenario. Great opener. On to the Vanishing of Eleanor Harper. It's a tough one for me. I think I'm going to put it in good. I like playing it. The Cluedo part of it is... it's engaging. I have my beef with it. I think that there is some, like... lackluster parts to its design that kind of makes it feel like at a certain point you're just hoping for a good result. Where it kind of feels like I've had, even with good play, I've had to do more 50-50s than I've wanted to in the past. And I think that does kind of fall onto the shoulders of The Vanishing of Eleanor Harper, where I think that that is a big issue. And yeah, the Suspects having no VP is a choice. It is certainly a choice that the designers made. So don't know if I think it's a good choice. I actually think it's a bad choice. I don't know why they made that choice for like the locations having VP, but the Suspects don't, because they each give you clues to help you advance the scenario. It might be because the Suspects show up later, but like they could have just added a line of text that removed them. There was a weird choice for some of the stuff that came here, but overall, I think it's a good scenario. In Too Deep is one of the best scenarios Arkham has ever made. It's an incredible scenario. The map layout, I remember when I set this one up and I put all the pieces out, and Travis and I just kind of looked at it and we were like, oh fuck, this is going to be a nightmare to play. But it's actually it's smooth like fucking butter, man. Like this is just like a very easy scenario to kind of put together and understand what the goal is, why you're doing it, how it all works. The barricade mechanic is very intuitive. The fact that you kind of like path through like this is really cool. The murder ball that shows up, the Shuggoth halfway through, the bus that you can take. There are so many cool pieces to this scenario. I love that it happens every time I play it, whether it be in a campaign or a standalone, where somebody gets dragged back into a place where it's like, oh no, you're probably not going to make it out of here, right? Like, I think that that's so damn engaging. And I think that it's one of those pieces where it just like everything syncs together. Everything's a threat. It starts like the pacing for the scenario is very good. I love how the mob shows up so you can really test your decks to see if you can get all the keys and get an extra +1 in the bag, which does feel very good if you are able to do that. I think that that's like, there's a lot of really cool stuff in this scenario. I think it just like, it really sings. Innsmouth is full of bangers. I agree. Devil Reef, I've been enjoying this one more the more and more I play it. I'm going to put this one in a good scenario. I love the islands. I love like the visual that it puts out. Like the opening map on Devil Reef is really cool. I love when a map tells a story, right? And I think that Devil Reef does a very good like opening synopsis where you're like, I'm in the boat in the middle of the open waters, and we got 4 little like islands we can go check out. It's so damn cool, and I think that's really neat. I love how each island expands naturally as well in a way that's also very different and engaging. I think that's really cool. The Terror of Devil Reef that shows up at the halfway point, kind of on the Masked Hunter flip, is really neat as well. I like that you can kind of prepare for it on future plays. And then there's the Loigor, who's also just there discarding cards from your hand. Getting both at the same time is a very daunting thing to climb out of, but you feel very accomplished as a player if you are able to climb out of it, which I think is always just very rewarding when that happens. The deep ones are threatening, as they always are. I think the deep one set is always very, very daunting. I think my big criticism for Devil Reef is that the lower player count scaling is always a little bit tough, but anytime I can do a full clear with 2 players, I feel like I really fucking earned it. So I'm very, very happy with this scenario. I look forward to playing it, and I like playing it. Horror in High Gear. I think it's a bit too on the rails for me to really like playing it. I don't hate playing horror in high gear like I used to back in the day. I really dislike this scenario. At this point now, I'm kind of just like neutral on it. I don't hate it, but I'm not like chomping at the bit to play horror in high gear. I think my big problem with this one is that once I realized you never want to put your foot on the gas, it became a lot easier. And it's just like, it became a lot less engaging. And it's like, why am I going to ever interact with that mechanic when I can just like win this scenario over time? I do like how it's kind of like Essex or like City of Archives, where it's like asking you to play a different type of game of Arkham, right? And I think that that's always interesting, where it's just like, how efficient can you be at clearing out a location with one shot at it, right? You always could stop the car. You always could, but then things can catch up. Yeah, overall, I think it's fine. I don't really hate it. I don't love it. It's just kind of there. A Light in the Fog, I love this scenario. I'm going to put it in amazing. I think probably previously in the past I had it as one of the bests, but I don't think it's there this year. I think realistically only 2 more scenarios are going to be in one of the best for me personally. Bonus points if you know what those are. You can shoot your shots in chat if you feel so inclined. But I really love the story that Light in the Fog tells. I love how you get locked in the basement with Osiris. It's such a great fucking moment. I can't express enough how much like that resonated with me on the first play, where I was just like, this is real Arkham shit. This is why I play this game, and this is why this one has stuck with me so much. That's like such a engaging storytelling moment. I think Osiris Marsh is a great little like enemy that we have here. I really am liking. There's just so much to like about this. The Deep One babies, the Deep One matriarchs, like the mothers, the Deep One bull, like all this shit just comes together for like a perfect storm of so much mechanical identity, and it works so damn well. It has a cool hook. I agree, like the little mini goals for each before the agenda flips is very engaging and really pushes me as a player to get that stuff done. I like that you could feasibly play this scenario forever if you were good enough. Travis tried to do that with Amanda once, and it was really fun to watch. I do think the pump minigame is a little bit dull, but I'm not going to fault the scenario too much for it, because it does just like... It makes sense within the context of the scenario, and I actually think it is pretty engaging on your first plays, but at a certain point now, I'm just like, okay, time to pump, right? Like, I think it's a little bit less appealing on future plays, but everything else around it is really good, and I haven't even talked about getting like, kidnapped and put in the jail. There's a lot of really fucking good shit in this scenario, and I do love how it has campaign elimination. I like when they do that, and I think that they should revisit it more often, because it is very cool. Lair of Dagon's biggest crime for me is that I actually find it to be very boring. Its mechanical identity is curse tokens. What if we just put curse tokens in the bag? And that's not really like an engaging hook for me as a player at this point in my life. Like, I think it was a cool idea for like the first play, where it was like, ooh, they're interacting with the mechanic from the block, because Blessed and Kurth is in the player card expansions. I think it's only fun that they were in the scenario expansions as well. What a neat idea. And I think that like that's true. It's a neat concept, but like in actuality, it's just like, we're just gonna shitter up your bag. I think a big thing as well is just through the story pacing. I feel like it would have been better if Lair of Dagon and Light in the Fog were switched. I understand why they aren't, is because here's Dagon. Like, here's Dagon. He's the big guy. Like, that's the lead-in for that, right? And I think that that is a cool, like, concept for the pacing, but I think that, like, Light in the Fog would have been a better penultimate scenario. I do like the Dagon part of it. I do think it's a very tough puzzle, and it feels very accomplished. Like, you feel very accomplished if you are able to, like, solve the puzzle in time. But It's just a matter of the fact that it has the thing also, the hate my pet peeve, where I hate where there's a map switch halfway through a scenario. It just like never really inspires me when that does happen. I think overall I'm going to put Lair of Dagon in annoying for me personally. I think it's definitely on like the lower side of Innsmouth for sure, and also on the lower side of the scenarios as a whole. I just think that like I wish they did more with the Esoteric Order of Dagon, because it was one of my favorite places from Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Those are my own personal complaints there. But I think that as a whole, it's just like... It just feels like it's retreading too much ground at this point through the campaign. I think a very fair criticism for Innsmouth is the fact that you're like seeing the underwater caverns over and over and over again, and this is like again, and then unfortunately we have like again. I think Into the Maelstrom is a fine closing scenario. I think that as a whole, Innsmouth is weaker in the climax compared to the other ones. To me, like, the campaign really ends in Light of the Fog. I know if I beat Light in the Fog, I'm going to beat the whole campaign as a whole. I really like the campaign. I think that, like, I don't hate playing Into the Maelstrom, or even, like, I don't even, like, hate playing Lair of Dagon. I just, like, don't enjoy it. They're not, like, making me be like, I can't wait to play these scenarios, right? But the top end of this campaign is very good. Into the Maelstrom is just, I think the map would have been it would have been better if the map was tighter, right? Where it's like you couldn't really Benny Hill the Ancient Ones too much, because you kind of just end up bullying them, which is really unfortunate. I do like the mutation where it's I forget what they're called. They're not called mutations, right? Whatever they're called for, like, when you make a scenario harder. Where they always ready even if you exhaust them, right? I think that that's really cool. But I think as a whole, the map for Into the Maelstrom just made the scenario a bit too easy. Refractions, thank you. I like the idea of there being, like, draining the thing so it keeps, like, rising to the surface. You can kind of get that mechanically from the flood tokens. But say it with me, everybody. It's one of my least favorite things. There are 2 maps for this final scenario, and I do not like that shit. I do not like a 2-map final scenario. I think that they tried it with Where the Gods Dwell, and We Are the Cosmos, and both of them were pretty interesting. But I think that in Into the Maelstrom, they probably would have been tighter if you just didn't have to do the first part. I probably would have been a better scenario if you just didn't have to do the first part. And I think that really knocks down Into the Maelstrom for me personally. Okay. Edge of the Earth. So overall, I enjoy Edge of the Earth. I think it's a good campaign. I think it definitely has some weak points. So let's just get right into it. Oh, good boy, buddy. There you go. There you go. I think a big thing for Edge of the Earth is there's not too many, like, stellar scenarios. And while the campaign as a whole is very good for me personally, I hate how it ends. Like, I actually think it ends like... Yes, hello. I actually think it ends pretty badly. When you say towards the end it ramps down, no, it ramps up into a blender. But yeah, no. I don't like how the campaign ends. I think that it's like... It's a really, really rough finale for me personally. It's kind of like a perfect storm of everything I, like, dislike in an Arkham scenario. Yeah, you just wanted some attention. What's this on your chin? What is that? What do you got there, buddy? I don't know what it is. Anyway, Ice and Death Part 1, I think, is a good opening scenario. What are you doing? What are you doing? I love the story the map tells. I kind of like how the map kind of evolves. I think the whole Ice and Death map is actually a pretty good, is actually like a pretty good actualization of the concept they had, which was like the map being there, right? Like, and I think that, like, it looks really nice. I think it all makes sense. I love the different locations. I like what they all do as well. I think like at a certain point you heard me stop talking about the locations being bad. I think as a whole, after like Dunwich, they got better at the the design of locations in particular, and I think like the ones for yeah, clean that foot. The ones in Edge of the Earth are very good. I like how they have that. I'm not going to be talking too much about like the partner stuff for this because I'm not ranking the campaigns. I'm ranking the scenarios. And for me as a player, I don't really give two shits too much about like what happens like between the scenarios, right? Like to me it's more about like how the actual scenarios feel, so I'm not going to talk too much about that kind of stuff. But Ice and Death, it's challenging. The Tekalili stuff in the scenario is kind of fun, but there's not really like a super exciting hook or like big exciting twist that really makes me want to put it with like the higher up on the these first scenarios there. Ice and Death Part 2, I think flavorfully is very fun. I'm going to put that one in the great tier. I think that this one it's really being lifted up by the vibe. I really enjoy the vibe of this scenario. And I think the vibe does a lot to elevate it for me personally. I don't think it's enough to really like... I think I had this one higher in the past, but as I've played it more, the vibe has kind of died down a little bit. But the theming of this one is so damn cool. I love the concept of waking up in the middle of the night and like realizing something's wrong. Have you seen, like, there's a movie on Netflix called The Ritual, where the main character wakes up in the middle of the night and then finds everyone else in his hiking party, like, in various nightmarish, fucked up places due to the influence of the malevolent forces around them. Hi, buddy. So, and like, that's kind of what this reminds me of, right? And I think it does it in a very good way. It's very Donner Party-esque. I like to save certain party members more so mechanically than like thematically, which is kind of a knock a little bit on them as a whole, but again, I'm a more mechanical player, so it does kind of make sense. But I think that this is a great scenario. Ice and Death Part 3, I actually have grown to enjoy as well. I think I'm also going to put this in the great tier. I think that this is a very strong scenario. I used to dislike it, and I used to dislike the kind of like enemy waves as a whole. But this is one that like I got better for me the more I played it. And a big reason for that is that, like other scenarios, what happened to you, buddy? You kind of have to like know how to play it. And if you meet it in that way, if you meet it where it wants to be, you'll have a much more successful time. So I think that that is like made it better for me. And I agree. You get rewarded for going to fight the enemies, and you get rewarded for that, and I think that's really nice that the scenario wants to do that for you as a player. And I think that as a whole, that is pretty damn successful. What else was I going to say? I was going to say one other thing, but I forget what it was. Yeah, I think it's just like, I've grown to like it. Once you meet the scenario where you want to meet it and you understand the puzzle it's trying to ask you to solve, you become better at solving the puzzle. And then in turn, it becomes a more enjoyable puzzle to solve because you're starting to understand the tricks of solving that puzzle every time you play it. To the Forbidden Peaks is probably the best scenario in Edge of the Earth. And it's so simple. I think that this is a great testament to how a very simple scenario can really pop in Arkham. You don't need a lot of fancy things. You don't need a lot of cool twists. You don't need a lot of crazy shit. Just, here's 5 locations. Get to the fucking top, you loser. Right? Like, That's all this scenario needs, and it really works with very little. I like the little mini game that comes into this one where you have to decide if you want to bring stuff up the mountain with you. I love the Terror in the Stars dragging you down. Russ, we do not need to go on the table. Oh, we do not need to dig your claws into me. Russ, you tore a hole in my jeans, you little pervert. I think that's like a really cool part of this. Like him dragging you down the mountain. There's just a lot of really good pieces in this scenario. City of the Elder Things, I'm gonna put down in the good tier. Okay, sorry, buddy. I'm going to put it down in the good tier this year. And I think that this one has kind of, again, dropped down for me. I think mechanically it is very interesting. I think thematically, exploring the city is fun. I think the locations as a whole are pretty all right. I think they all kind of like make sense, and they're more than just like, here is bad, enjoy bad, which is, I think, something that has really been in my mind in this last year. But as a whole, I think it's just like, upon repeat plays, the gimmick feels a little bit more played out, and it kind of becomes like, why would I want to interact with this one too much? I don't really want to engage with the scenario anymore. Once you realize it's just about, okay, here are the keys I need to get, I'm going to get those keys and then get out of here. It's like, okay, that's what I'm doing. And I understand a lot of Arkham scenarios are kind of like that, but like, the Pallid Mask is, I have to go find the room I need to find with the guy. But like the way the map evolves is really cool. And even though there's 3 different maps for this one, it's like, and like slightly different setups, which is neat. I don't really look forward to playing City of the Elder Things anymore. It kind of feels more like a chore. But at the baseline, it is just very good Arkham. Like, it's just like a traditional Arkham experience. So it's going to always be like probably at least good for me. But it's missing like that really like good flavor that'll really make a scenario sing for me personally. I think Fatal Mirage is just kind of annoying. I don't think this scenario is fun, right? I think you only really do this scenario because you're like, okay, I am presented with the opportunity to do it, so I guess I'm just gonna do it. And I don't know if that's a particularly, like, good selling point for a scenario. And, like, it's one of those things where, like, they made such a bad choice of having the Dr. Kensler being, like, the person who has the main story. So if you get in that scenario, you're like, all right, I guess I'm going to try to save Dr. Kensler. So you always end up following the same path. I feel like this is something that should have happened no matter what. Like, after Ice and Death Part 3. Like, no matter what, you should have got it there. And then it could have been like, go save somebody. Get somebody resolute. And then that resolute person should have never been able to die. Right? And if they were hit, they were like, boom, I stopped the guy. No problem. Yeah. But that's kind of getting into the campaign structure. But as a scenario in and of itself, very dull. Just a very dull scenario. I think Heart of Madness Part 1 is a good scenario. It's a good setup for the finale. I love the giant spoke map. I love the amount of control you as a player have over that kind of map. The enemies in this scenario are very tough. There's some very scary enemies here. The flavor text of, it's also mechanical text where if 2 are on the same location, it blows up and everybody dies. And I think that would be a really cool, I think that's a really cool line of text there. Yeah, I like activating the seals. There's a good sense of accomplishment in putting them down. It's actually surprisingly hard to activate the seals as well. it's cool. It feels like you're exploring in ancient ruins, right? And you're like trying to find these seals to get the job, like to do whatever sort of MacGuffin effect they have over it. I think that all comes across really well. Yeah, it's just a good scenario. This one, on the other hand, I don't like playing it at all. No, I don't like playing it at all. The first half is fine, but it kind of just feels like you're doing chores, you know? Like, it's not one of those things where it's like, ooh, I'm playing Arkham. I'm stopping this primordial ichor from spreading. It's, I'm evading this ichor and hopefully succeeding by enough, in which case I will exhaust other ichors around me, and then I will progress the game forward. It's kind of a bit more just like an action tax. And an action tax is not really like engaging as a player. You're not like, I can't wait to interact with this. It's more, I have to interact with this lest we die, right? And like that in and of itself is already pretty dull. And then you have the ramp, the second part, the map switch, which again, I should say it by now, I hate map switching in my finales. I do not like it, Sam I Am. I do not like green eggs and ham, right? Like, it's kind of the shit that just like, I roll my eyes and my blood boils. That's a little bit over the top. My blood doesn't boil from it. I mean, probably I have high blood pressure, but you know, that's probably unrelated to other things. But it's one of those things where I just like, it makes me just go, we're really doing this. And even when I play it and I know what's coming, I'm just like, we're going to go up the ramp. And then, lo and behold, I find out if you actually get all the seals, like all the mist pylons destroyed, what do you get rewarded with? The ramp. That's that really ticked me off when that happened. Whereas like, even if you complete your objective, you still get the luxury of climbing up that damn ramp. And I hate that fucking ramp, brother. It is not for me. I do like the mist pylon locations. I like the puzzle of solving them. I like the rewards for the seals. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in this scenario, but it's kind of just like echoes of Heart of Madness Part 1. So it gets all the credit, and Heart of Madness Part 2 gets put in the bin. Oh my god. I don't know why I'm surprised we're doing Scarlet Keys here. Okay, my apologies, everybody, if you're a fan of Scarlet Keys. Because I am not a fan of Scarlet Keys. So I am just going to put that out here right now. And my dislike of Scarlet Keys has absolutely nothing to do with the writing, the amount of reading, or the time structure. I just actively am down or meh on the majority of the scenarios in this campaign. I just don't think they're fun to play. I don't look forward to playing them. And I am happy when they are over, win or lose. So I'm just putting that out there right now. If you're a fan of the Scarlet Keys, I'm sorry. Just in advance. Just in advance. Alright. Riddles and Rain. It's an alright opening scenario. I think this is probably one of the few that I'll put in the good tier. This is just some nice classic Arkham. It has like a really good like introduction to the mechanics. Hey, Kodab Games, thank you so much for the raid. It is a really good kind of like introduction into the concealed mechanic and kind of teaches you as it goes. I really enjoy the Red Glove Man being the person there who is like, you are who we must beat. You are the challenge that is going to be here. And I really like kind of like the through line as you're kind of like chasing him further and further into the Tower Prison in London. I think that's all really cool stuff. But it's also kind of just like, it's so on the rails, right? It's kind of like Beyond the Gates of Sleep, which I did put in fine, but I do think that this is better than fine, where it's just kind of like, you're doing this thing, and that's what you're going to do, right? You're always going to go here, you're always going to go here, you're always going to go here. and then it's going to end with the final confrontation. And there's nothing wrong inherently with being on the rails. But it's one of those things where it does kind of knock it down a bit for me personally. Dancing Mad is fine. And Dancing Mad is one of the scenarios I'm more positive on. I mean, like, a lot of these are going to be fine scenarios. Like, I'll still play Scarlet Keys. But I don't enjoy it, and it's going to come through this. I like the Spider-Man moment where there's the two Desiderios pointing at each other. I think the Shrouds are too high in this scenario. And I think that, like, the mechanics of it I think, like, the concealed mechanic in this one is kind of just, like, very basic concealed. And I think that there's just, like, not really anything... There's not really anything too engaging here besides the Desiderio thing. I don't even remember the pacing of this scenario that much, but it's not... it's not particularly memorable, and I think that I've played this one probably, like, maybe, like, 8 or 10 times. And at this point now, like, I'd remember it. Like, I remembered, like, a lot of these earlier scenarios the first time I played it, right? Like, I'm still latched to Light in the Fog from my first playthrough. Same with, like, House Always Wins, which is only in good tier, right? I just don't, like... And that's kind of a big issue with Scarlet Keys for me personally, is that it's kind of like... the concealed mechanic wasn't explored interestingly enough in comparison to other mechanics, and they kind of the scenarios kind of all just kind of blend together because of that. Dead Heat, I think, is another one of the scenarios I'll consider to be good. I like playing this one. I think that's a fun part of this one is trying to keep the citizens alive and try to stop the infection. I like how it changes its difficulty depending on when you play it. Where's Midnight Mask? Midnight Mask is hanging out right here, up in the one of the best. But Dead Heat it's an enjoyable experience. I like Amaranth. She's a fun villain. I think that she is also menacing. I like how she has that lion that's a zombie. I think there's a lot of cool pieces to this. I think the design on the enemies are actually really good in this scenario, where it's there's like those zombies that you can like evade as lightning bolts. I think that's all really cool. There's a lot of really good stuff going on here, but it still has kind of that like Scarlet Keys vibe, where it feels as if the structure of the campaign is where the majority of the work went, and the scenarios were kind of just like there, right? And I said I wasn't going to comment on it, but I actually do enjoy the structure of the Scarlet Keys campaign. I think there's some really cool stuff there, but I think as a whole the scenarios suffered, which is what brings it down for me, because the scenarios are what I think of when I play the campaign, not so much the campaign structure, everything around it, which is a little bit strange, but that's how I am. Dealings in the Dark is fine. It's a fine scenario. This is the one with the market. Thank God I changed the image for these ones so I actually remember what these are. But yeah, this one is it's fine. It's an okay experience. It has a 2-map thing, and like it's really just like one map that just gets some locations at it, but because they told you to set it aside, just don't set it aside. They probably did that for confusion. I don't really know why they did. I'm going to wager for confusion. I like the part inside the market. The part outside of the market is kind of just okay. I think the market part is definitely cool. I think like the map in that, the design on that is really good. But I think that again, it just kind of feels like you're there. It's kind of, and it's also, this is like a fixed Echoes of the Past, which is good because Echoes of the Past did need a little bit of some, you need like a little bit of work for Echoes of the Past to make it like a little bit brighter. And I think that Dealings in the Dark does accomplish that, but I think not enough for it to make it a scenario that I want to play. It's more like one of those things where like both Dealings in the Dark and Dancing Mad, where someone said, hey, do you want to run through these on your Scarlet Keys run? I'd say, yeah, sure. I'm down to run those in this one, and that's kind of where they sit there. Dogs of War is annoying. Okay, I'm gonna use one of these new tiers here. I'm gonna put this one in not intrigued but need to play more. I'm gonna actually use these tiers that I have because I had not played this one. I've played Dogs of War once, and I have never wanted to play it again. And the downside of Scarlet Keys' structure is that because you are the arbiter of your own fate for what scenarios to play, why the fuck would I play one that I'm not interested in playing, right? So, like, I do think I need to play more to get, like, a final verdict on this one, but it's definitely on, like, the lower side of thing. I feel like this campaign would have benefited if there was more, like, you chose a predetermined direction, and then, like, at a certain point, they'd be like, okay, now the world is yours, but here are some, like, starting points. Like, here are some points of interest that you might need to matter. You might want to go to Alexandria to deal with this because something bad is happening, right? And otherwise, it's like, why would I ever interact with a scenario that I think is kind of just, like, is doo-doo, right? As Astute put so astutely in the chat there. Yeah. Not intrigued, but I do admittedly need to play this one more. On Thin Ice is also just fine. I enjoyed this one for a while, but that might have just been because it took place in Alaska, so it resonated with my, like, close to the Pacific Northwest favorite spot in the world to go to, into the mountains surrounded by evergreens, right? It's just like, oh, it's heaven, it's where I want to be forever. So I definitely was blinded by that, but mechanically, I think this one leaves a lot to the imagination. I do enjoy that this one at least tried to do something different with the concealed thing in a way. I think that this one and also the Scarlet, the Carmen Sandiego one, I think that that could be like a really good way of like, I like that they at least tried to explore concealed in a different way. But it's still just kind of dull, right? Like, what's the cool part of this scenario? Because there's only one thing that I find really memorable in this scenario. And I'm going to say it in 3, 2, 1. The grizzly bear. That's like the only thing that I view like is really memorable from this. And then maybe also the trapper who shoots you with a gun if you enter his property. I think that part's pretty sick as well. But as a whole, On Thin Ice is just another thing. It's that Scarlet Keys just kind of fine. Where like the more I play it, the more I'm like, okay, it's okay. Thoughts on doing Scarlet Keys as a series of standalone instead of as a straight campaign to experience all the scenarios? I actually think Scarlet Keys doesn't have standalone setup instructions. But I think it could be a fun thing to try. You could just have to like basically build your own time structure for it. I think that would be the way. Sanguine Shadows is annoying. I don't enjoy playing this one. I think that there are some big mechanical faux pas with this scenario. I think that it's a damn shame that you don't get to play the engaging part of the scenario unless you go 3 for 3 on the unengaging part of the scenario. And I think that's what really puts it in annoying for me, where it's just kind of like you have to play the dull part 3 times and you need to bat 100 or you're going to get put into... all you got to play is the dull part. I think the real fun part is the second half, right? It should have been 2 out of 3. Or it should have been like, it happens as long as you get 1, but you get punished. It's like a harder second half. I think that would have been the way to do it. I don't like playing Sanguine Shadows. I will give it its flowers. I do enjoy that it asks you to play a different sort of Arkham game to meet it where it wants to be played. And maybe in the future, I'll think more positively because of that. But I don't know if that's going to happen. I just don't think it's the way for me personally. I don't know. I just don't like it. Shades of Suffering, I think, is also just a little bit annoying. I think it's at least memorable. So I think that's really cool. It reminds me a lot of Wages of Sin. There's a lot of mechanics going on here, right? Like there's the umbrella, there's the action loss, there's the ghosts. And I don't think it's particularly engaging in any of those parts. I hate the ghost part. I hate a mechanic that's like, I need to be in the right place, but you only get to find that out if you beat me. And if you beat me, I'm going to make your life miserable every turn until you get me where I need to go. So hopefully you did the right thing, right? So that to me is a big detractor for Shades of Suffering type effects. So I'm going to be marking it accordingly because of that. So not the biggest fan of Shades of Suffering, so I'm going to put it there in the annoying category. How's it going, Phantom of the Stream? Without a Trace, I'm going to put this one in intrigued but need to play more. What a great new set of tiers for these tier lists, huh? I've only played this one once. I actually got the secret ending on a recent path, and I died. I lost the campaign, but I'm very curious to give this one another shot in the future. Because I think that this is like a more enjoyable mechanic of the I don't think it's intuitive, the whole like locations in the concealed area, right? I think that is not really, I'm not really vibing with it, but I think that this was a more enjoyable version of it compared to Congress of the Keys. So I'm very interested to give this one another shot. And then we got Congress of the Keys. I'm going to put this one in I don't like playing it at all. This is easily my least favorite finale. I think it has a lot of... Okay. I've said it a lot of times in this video, and I'm going to say it again. Campaign finales with a map switch is not the way to do it. There's just too much loaded into this. Can you imagine how much better this would have been if there was 2 scenarios? Even if it was short, just one when you got to deal with the actual like coterie, and then the other one where you were in Wibbly Wobbly World, right, in Static Valley. The game would have been so much better paced, and you would have been able to spend more time in the interesting part of this, where it's like the result of the vote and actually seeing through the coterie part, because what it ultimately ends up feeling is like this coterie doesn't fucking matter. You spent the whole time interacting with this coterie through flavor text and all that, and you got to see them in the scenarios, and then in the end it's like, okay, but the end of that story doesn't matter because here is the static land, like this place where things go that are forgotten, which is a cool concept. I'm gonna say that I think it's a cool concept, but it just like doesn't really work. And the map switch is abysmal, but it's not just a map switch. You have to do the encounter decks, right? Like it's like a whole new scenario. Just split that shit up and it'll like be tighter because of that. So it's like, that would be huge. That would have been huge, but I just don't like playing it. I think there's some cool parts. I like the code cracking part in the middle of the second part. And I think the confrontation with the whatever its name is, the Ancient One, is a pretty neat finale. I like what's there, but I think that it's, as a whole, my least favorite finale. Even more so than Heart of the Madness Part 2. I'll play Heart of the Madness Part 2 and like enjoy it until the ramp, but I'm like dreading Congress of Keys when we set it up, because I'm just like, I don't really enjoy any part of it. Okay. Let's head on to Hemlock Vale. So, like with Scarlet Keys, I'm going to put a little bit of a statement at the start of this. I love Hemlock Vale. It's like probably my second favorite campaign easily. So the reason for this is because as a whole, it really resonates with me. Because every scenario has what I want, right? Which is something thematic and storytelling within the scenario. So, like, those are two things that are just really big for me, and a lot of Hemlock stuff hits that for me as a player. So I'm just saying that because I know there are people who love Hemlock and there are people who hate Hemlock. So I'm just getting that out there right now. I am not one of the haters. And things are going to be put there because of that for me. I think this is a great campaign, and the ratings are going to match that. Hemlock Preludes, though, am I a weird motherfucker where I like playing the Preludes? I actually like playing the Hemlock Preludes. Like, I might just be a weirdo. That might just be like a weird quirk I have. But like they work for me, and like cuz they're basically just elaborate setup, right? But like I like doing it. The Spike part of me likes making my perfect opening hand. Like I really like that. I really like just being like, okay, this is exactly the 5 cards that I want here, and my 6th card in play. Like, I'm going to win this campaign with this. So, like, that might be... Like, I think it... But again, it is. Like, the Hemlock Preludes are just, like, setup. But I like them. I can't explain why. But I actually do like playing the Preludes. I like setting them up. I like playing them. I like interacting with people, even though I don't even read the flavor text anymore. My group thinks playing a prelude plus a scenario takes too long, so a prelude has robbed a week of Arkham for me when I've played the campaign. Sorry, your group plays a prelude for their Arkham session? That's fucked up. I mean, I do think that there should have been a way in the book to skip preludes, like on the back being like, here's how you can play without preludes. I really wish they did that. I think that would have made like this like a 10 out of 10 for me. But it does like kind of bring it down to like a 9 out of 10 because of that. But like, I think that like that should have been included in there as an option, because the thing is like people are not going to always want, it's like the same with like how there's Dare BK made the recommended routes for Scarlet Keys. Just like give the player those things, because not a lot of players are going to want to make those decisions every time they play. And especially if like replayability is the goal, there's the question of, are people fucked up like me where they want to play the prelude every time? And the answer is usually no. But I like the preludes, right? So I think that could have been a good solution to have there in the book itself. But I'm a weirdo, and I like the preludes. Written in Rock. People hate the minecart scenario. But you know what? I think it's fucking good, okay? I like the minecart scenario. It's like a fixed horror in high gear. Because you're in a minecart and it's like a big puzzle. What I love about the minecart scenario is that you put the map down. I mean, it does have a map switch, which I'm going to talk about negatively for a bit, but it does kind of make sense here. It's kind of like in the more Where's the God Dwell, where it's like, here's the prelude for the whole scenario. I don't think it would have been bad if it just started in the minecart. I don't think that would have been that bad. But it is there. But what I love is when you get the entire map put out, and then you're like, okay, how do we solve this shit? What's our route here? And I really like that kind of puzzle solving part of the Arkham. It reminds me of certain scenarios from like Dark Matter, where like location matters, and you can like kind of, it's like one of the few scenarios that actually have like a puzzle, and I think that's very commendable. And I see why people don't like it, but I like the minecart. I think it's a good scenario. It's fun to solve the puzzle. Hemlock House, yo, this is another good scenario. I like fighting the house. I love sealing the house. I like the mechanic has an interesting hook, right? Where it's just like, see, like you'll notice this for like every single one of these Hemlock scenarios. It's like, oh, this is the X scenario. This is the minecart scenario. This is the house scenario. I need to drink some water. My throat is killing me. And it's a big reason why I like Hemlock, is because there's such a thematic hook to each scenario. What else can I say about this? I don't know. It's like Carcosa. Carcosa I went through pretty quick. Actually, just kidding. Carcosa was 15 minutes. But a big thing for Hemlock House is just that I feel as if the locations, like all this stuff, it's all very intuitive as well. I've never done the destroy the house thing, like the redecorating, but I do think that that could be a really fun thing to try in the future. I normally seal just because the demands of killing these rooms are also met by there being enemies in the deck, right? Which makes sense because you need to punish the side who isn't trying to destroy the house, but it does make destroying the house harder. But I think it's a fun, enjoyable scenario, and it really, really gets the job done. The Silent Heath, otherwise known as the Bug scenario. I think that this is a great scenario. I love the Bug scenario. I think the vibe in this one is very unsettling. I also love that it has that kind of like edge that I really enjoy in Arkham, where it's just like once you look past the game, you realize the gravity of the situation and just how dark and depressing this is, where you are just, your character is walking through this like blasted heath and holding the crystallized, decomposed body of a child, right? And just like the horror that they're being dealt is them actually physically holding this body, right? Just like comprehending and experiencing what's going on is causing them to lose their sanity, right? And that's such like a beautiful storytelling moment. You know what? I'm gonna put this one up in amazing, because I think it's in my top 3 at this point now. I think that this is a killer scenario, and I love so much about it. I love the bugs. I love that there's this like recurring theme throughout this campaign for the most part, where it's just like the enemies that you're dealing with it's just the nature that's been fucked up by the color, right? I think that that's like really damn cool. I love it. Lost Sister. So this one used to be my amazing, but I think I'm going to just put it in great this time. I think I'm going to switch these two. I love the vibes of this one. Again, like exploring the shores, going through like the caves and all that. The map is like, the map has that pallid mask type thing where all the locations, like they spread out in a way so you get kind of like a different experience each time. And I think that that's just like really hype. One of my favorite things from the first one was the storytelling thing of like drawing the creature into the light and mechanically telling a thematic story by it flipping over and getting damage from the sun and becoming weaker. That's so damn fucking cool, man. I love that kind of storytelling that exists within the scenario, and that's just like very impressive stuff. I think it's a great scenario in a great campaign. As you can see, like I told you, Hemlock I'm very, very hyped on. And the reason for that is just that like mechanically they're fun and thematically they're very good. Thing in the Depths, I think it's just fine. My big thing for Thing in the Depths is that I wish it I wish the bog didn't sink as much or was tied to the number of players in order to sink, right? Where it was like it was like, I don't know, like 6 minus player, right? I mean, that probably would have been too small for solo. So I understand why they went with a fixed amount, but I do feel like it's just one of those things where the bog sinks too quick and you don't really get to interact with that mechanic in a great way. You mostly just have to like accept it or just never stop moving, which I understand potentially could be the point of it, but I don't know if it really like works too much for me as a player for that kind of thing. With that said, I think that the turtle is a fun little escort mission. I think the Thing in the Depths is a cool boss, albeit they might be a little bit too easy to game potentially. I think overall it's a fine scenario though. Definitely, in my opinion, the weakest of the day scenarios for Hemlock Vale. Okay, the 2 night scenarios, Twisted Hollow and Longest Night. I'm going to throw both of these in one of the best. We'll talk very quickly about the Longest Night. This is an incredible scenario. It's so hard, but it's so fun to play. It's very tense, and they give you such an easy out because it truly is just kind of like a test your mettle type scenario. And if you find that you are not able to withstand it, you can just leave. But you can try and push and hope and use what you have, use your traps, use the fire, use the movement to try to come out on top. And if you're able to, that's great. If you're not, just get out of there before you die. The kind of tower defense style system works very well. It's just an apex scenario. This one has been here for a while, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But the Twisted Hollow is a very interesting Arkham experience for me, where when I first played it, I was like, oh, this is fine. This is a good scenario. It's all right. I enjoy it. Like, I had a good time, but I don't really view it that highly. But then every time I played it, it became better and better and better, because it's just one of the best Arkham scenarios ever made. And it does such a good job in so many ways of hitting its thematic story through mechanics, right? It's also one where I kind of forgive that the map changes halfway through, because the map is kind of always changing in the Twisted Hollow, right? Where you have this like map that says you're exploring through the dark, and if it gets too dark, you lose track of where you were in the forest, and then you finally get the full map out. So it's like, it's weird because it's like that's the actual map for the scenario, but everything else was kind of just like the appetizer for the map. The bear, the first showing for the bear is all there. I agree. When it's saying the bear was wounded after like barely escaping is really cool. I like how it's always tight. It's a scenario that always ends up going down to the wire, which I think is very cool. It's just a phenomenal scenario for Twisted Hollow. Just absolutely one of the best. And one that I did not expect on my first play, but the more and more I played it, the more and more I was like, damn, I like this shit. It's very fucking good. And then we have Fate of the Vale, which I think is just fine for a scenario. I have a lot of issues with this one. I do like that there is one of the paths you can follow that does not require a map change. Again, I am not a big fan of finale map changes here. They're just like not really for me. With that said, the one where it stays just in the basement is really good. However, there are a lot of issues with the balance of this scenario that Daniel and I actually talked about on his channel. And the real big problem with Fate of the Vale, in my opinion, is just that balancing thing, where the balance was just like a bit too skewed in a way that was way too oppressive for lower player counts and made it a lot harder to win because of that. It was like literally death by 1,000 cuts, and if 2 or 3 of those cuts weren't there, I think the scenario would be a lot better. Because I like the individual pieces of this scenario, but it's when you kind of put it all together that I think that the scenario starts to become just like a little bit too... It becomes a very hard pill to swallow, and it becomes kind of unmanageable. So I'm going to put that one down in fine. All right, I am losing my voice. I feel it in my throat. With all that said, though, let's move on to the Drowned City. All right, this one's going to be very quick because I've only played these ones, I think like 3 or 4 times since release, so not that much. I think we might try to like we might use some of these ones for this. I think One Last Job is a fine opening scenario. I like the mechanics with the mobsters where you have to find them and then use them to get clues. I like the finale where you have to, you know what, I'm going to put this one in good. I actually view it very similar to Riddles and Rain. They're both kind of like the same sort of vibe where I'm like, they're good, but they're not like great scenarios. I do like the finale, like the final bit where you have to like go and like shoot, like there's like the big shootout at the club. I think that's really cool. I think there's a lot of really nice pieces to this. I like that it takes place in Arkham before we have to go away from Arkham until the end. It's a really nice bookend. I noticed that there were some people, I saw some recent threads where they're like, why is it like this? And the reason for that is just that it's the bookend. Like, it starts in Arkham and ends in Arkham. That's how it works, and that's the vibe it's going for here. Western Wall, I think, is a good scenario. I much prefer the version where you go down the wall because it's harder. It's a little bit spookier as well. Really works for that. I think it has some nice pieces to it. I think again that there are some good, memorable scenarios in the Drowned City, but I think the Drowned City's biggest issue is that there's no standout scenarios in either direction, in my opinion. There's not really like a big stinker, and there's not really like a big like, ooh, this is like the reason we're playing Arkham, you know, like, and I think that's the big part of the Drowned City for the most part. So expect a lot of them kind of just living in these 2 tiers, which honestly is not like a terrible thing, right? It's not like awful that you have just like a good campaign that's just good across the board, but it certainly makes the campaign less memorable. Drowned Quarter, this is the water temple where you have to like lower water levels. Honestly, I think this is just another good scenario. There's nothing that I really like am too bothered by it. I enjoy the idea of playing it. I like the jellyfish enemies. The jellyfish enemies are pretty cool. I like the big boss that shows up halfway through. I think that that's really neat. Overall, the flooding stuff is a little bit tricky, but I still think it's an enjoyable experience as a whole. Yeah, I'm going to put this one in good. Again, I don't have too much more to say about these ones because I've only played them a handful of times. The Apiary, I think, is probably one of my more favorite ones from this. I'm going to put the Apiary in great, and a big part of this is because it feels fucking disgusting, you know? Like, it's like, you can feel the sliminess of the walls. You feel like you're crawling through like the innards of like a living creature. And that does a lot to lift it. I've played both halves of it, and I think both halves are pretty fun, either like going east or west because they are different. I think it's probably the best scenario in the Drowned City, so I'm going to be putting it in great to reward it accordingly for its sick-ass work. So, good job, Apiary. I think you're a very, very good scenario. Grand Vault, I like this one. I think I'm going to put this one in the good category over here. I like, because it's the one where you move the not the elevator around, but it's like the moving platform. Elevator's Court of the Ancients. where you kind of go around, and this is like the big, this is like potentially the big showcase against, like, showdown against the Inescapable. I think that's a really nice finish that we have here to his storyline if you are able to beat him, and I make it a goal to beat him. Because I think the Inescapable is a pretty relentless enemy, like a chase down enemy. I think he's really, really good for that in that regard. So, and I think it's good because we went a while without like a recurring enemy who shows up for more than just like 2 scenarios. And I think the the Inescapable is really nice, and the Grand Vault's a good climax to that sort of story. Court of the Ancients, this is the elevator one. I think this one's fine. The swooping enemies, these guys, they're relentless. Like, these guys don't fuck around. These guys are, like, they're something. I like this scenario. But I think the big problem with the scenario is that it kind of just feels like you go down or up, which I know is kind of stupid for me to like kind of like say that, right? But it is kind of just like, I just feel like it's so like we're like in the Grand Vault when I'm going around. It just feels a bit more dynamic because you're also like leaving a bit more. But Grand Vault and Court of the Ancients are actually very similar. There's a lot of kind of like, this one's more of like a dungeon crawl for Drowned City, so I can see why people don't resonate with that, because it's kind of just like, what if we took like different ideas of crawling through a dungeon and kind of use those to kind of like tell our story. And I think that it's kind of just there because of that. As a whole, Court of the Ancients, I think, is the one that I look forward to playing the least of all the scenarios we talked about, so that's why I'm going to put it in fine. This one's a lot easier if you're going in from the east, because like that's the only, if you're going in from the west, that's the only reason you want to go back down. I think Travis, Bryn, and I did try to do it in our blind run, with the power of the blind run. Yeah. Obsidian Canyons, I like this one. I think it's good. I like how it goes. I like how the map moves. I like how it's like kind of a puzzle to solve, how you can use the wind to your advantage if it does move, when it's bad, when it's good. There are some mechanical design choices that I don't necessarily agree with here too much, which are things like the victory locations not getting into the deck if they leave play, or not going to the victory display if they leave play, and no clues on them. I also don't like how you move into the location, like you grab a location from the deck and then put it into play face down, then move into it. I think that's very unintuitive. But overall, I like the puzzle that the Obsidian Canyons brings, and I enjoy playing it. Sepulchre of the Sleeper. I'm going to put this one intrigued, but need to play more. Travis, Britt, and I played it once. We're losing it, guys. We're losing it. We're losing the voice. I enjoyed it. I'm intrigued. I thought it was very cool. I liked how it was seemingly impossible. But it's a very tricky beast, but I'm very curious to try it again and see if I vibe with it, because I liked how it was so hard, and I kind of want to build a deck to try to beat it, because I think that could be pretty cool. Doom of Arkham Part 1, I think, is fine. It's an interesting setup scenario. I do like, thank God, that they did split it, so it's not like, okay, here's a second map, like flip the map, we're going to do this, you're going to play a 3-hour-long final scenario. Thank God for that. I think it's really nice to split up the finale. And then even though fighting Cthulhu, he's kind of a pushover, and I do wish that the scenario kind of challenged you a little bit more in some aspects, I do enjoy this final scenario. I think it's a fun battle against Cthulhu. It feels a lot like Arkham Horror 2nd Edition with the encounter cards. I think that the rooftop should have been destroyed quicker, so you actually have to go and fight Cthulhu on the ground. Or alternatively, if you're fighting from the rooftops, he takes like reduced damage, right? Or as a higher fight value. I think that that would be like a little bit more interesting, right? But I do think that the Cthulhu board and how he feels really big, the scale is really cool, kind of like in the same way when we talked about Achlanaka in the Weaver of the Cosmos a while ago in this video. I think that there's a lot of really cool moving parts, but I think as a whole, it's a little bit too easy. But again, the big sin, I think the big sin of Drowned City for me personally was that it's all kind of just good, which doesn't sound like a big sin, but like the memorable campaigns hit like these areas, right? You need to have like something up here to be like really memorable for a player. And for me, it's like not particularly memorable. All right, let's talk about the core 2026. These are 3 of the 4 new scenarios that were added since last year's tier list. And the core set is very similar to the original core. They are essentially kind of like reskins with tweaks of the original core scenarios, which we talked about almost 3 hours ago. How's it going, Time Roller? So if we look to see where those ones are, we're going to kind of use it as the comparison point. So the Gathering is here and fine. Midnight Masks is up here in one of the best. And I don't like playing it at all the Devourer of the Below is in I don't like playing it at all. These scenarios are very close to their original version. And while I do feel like this is where I should put these because I've only played them once at this point, because they felt so similar to previous scenarios, I am happy to talk about them here. All right, Russ, I'll give you something to eat after this video, okay? Okay, so Spreading Flames, I think, is a better Gathering. So I'm going to put Spreading Flames up in the good tier. I do legitimately think if I had the choice between playing the Gathering or the Spreading Flames, I would take Spreading Flames 100% of the time. The map is kind of pretty much the same thing. But the main reason why I would want to play Spreading Flames instead of the Gathering is simply because of the Fire Treachery. I think the Fire Treachery is a very dynamic addition to this core set and to that scenario that is very appealing as a player who's been playing a long time. I think it's a very menacing encounter set, and I think it also does a lot to really boost the decision points that come with the scenario. I think as a whole, Spreading Flames is it's the Gathering but better, so I'm going to put it 1 tier up based on my initial play of this scenario. Smoke and Mirrors is Midnight Masks but worse, which is honestly pretty fair. Midnight Masks is very good. I think right now I'm going to put it in great based on just my initial play. I can see this changing, and actually, funnily enough, I'm playing this next Tuesday on stream with some patrons for a patron game day, and I'm very excited to dive back into it and give it another go. So I think my big beef with this scenario is, one, it's missing that agenda flip into the Masked Hunter. I think that that was such a very awesome design moment that I would not have been upset if they just fucking literally did that one-to-one. I understand that that is there with the intention that the Servant of the Flame could just show up as one of the options for the face-down encounter cards you hit, so that's kind of in theory the same thing, but I don't think it actually mechanically comes across the same way. And I have a personal issue with the codex cards on the people you're talking to. Not because I don't like the codex mechanic, because I understand why those are there, because now that, like, I don't be surprised if in Children of Blood, we're gonna see, like, David Renfield, and we're going to be able to parlay with his codex ability, right? Because those are, like, mechanically there going forward to be pieces that can be in any scenario, and the parlay and the codex effect is now, like, universal, right? Like, that is, like, the intention of those cards. However, I'm not a big fan of, in that scenario, having to slow it down to go open the book. I think I'm going to be fine with it in other scenarios, but in a Midnight Mask scenario particularly, where I like the fast pace of the scenario, I'm going to miss that kind of quickness that comes in there. I understand that's going to speed up as we get deeper in and you become more, like, you understand the cards more. You don't need to, like, how do I parlay with this character? Okay, I read that, now I read this. Ooh, what do we do? Like, that kind of stuff. That is all going to become easier. But just on the initial assessment, I still think it's a great scenario. It could potentially go up to amazing, but I don't think it's on the level of Midnight Masks. But in all fairness, I think Midnight Masks would have been very hard to beat. And I do enjoy that these characters that are in the enemies that you can parlay with are now kind of going to become, like, recurring characters, so new Arkham fans can start to fall in love with these characters the same way we fell in love with some old characters in the past, which I think is really cool. And then we got Queen of Ash, which is a better Devourer below. It has a lot of the same sort of stuff. I think I'm going to put this one in, one of these two. I think it's legitimately good. I was going to put it in fine, but I actually think it's a good scenario. I drank that water wrong. I breathed in when I should not have done that. Again, these are kind of just like my initial assessment for these, and I need to give them more time. But I think ultimately what it's come down to is I can see myself playing Brethren of Ash again and again, where I never really had that for Night of the Zealot. I do think that the thematic beats in Night of the Zealot are missed. Like, I think the Lita Chandler, where you could sacrifice her to Umordoth, was very cool. I think that this is missing that kind of thing. I do like that there is an alternate ending condition for Queen of Ash, which I think is really cool. I do think that I have to remember the locations and see what they are like and see how they feel in comparison, but I think that the idea of the cult in the sewer is a pretty... It's not, like, as deep or as, like, kind of, like, engaging as as engaging as, like, the woods, but I still think it is a pretty good, like, weird horror sort of vibe to it. And it works for me. And I do think that, yeah, like, it has a better equivalent of all the cultists who show up, like the Herald of the Flame and, like, yeah, the two big boss enemies, like, that show up in the middle are really cool. I think Elikos is actually also, like, a cool design. I know some people don't like that they're designing new people, but honestly, Umordoth was new, and I think Umordoth's cool, man. I think that guy, like, it's a cool kind of concept, and I think Elikos is also pretty cool. So, yeah. I think as a whole, this is a good box, and like I said, I can see myself actually playing this. Not all the time, mind you, because I don't think it's deep enough in the way that I'm hoping Children of Blood will be, or even like one half of Dream Eaters would be, right? Which I have run as campaigns, playing only a half of Dream Eaters. But I do think that it is an improvement for the scenarios. But in all fairness, they were able to look at the original scenarios and be like, how can we make those better? And I think overall, they succeeded. Okay, we're here at the end in the standalone scenarios, and I'm going to just speed run through these in the Bryn format when he does Parallel Investigators, because I don't have too much to say about standalone scenarios, because I really only play them as standalone scenarios during game days, or alternatively, I might bring one or two into some campaigns if they do feel like they should fit, but I am not too big into playing standalones, so I'm not going to spend too much time going into them. Curse of the Rougarou. It's good. Very hard if you're playing it in standalone mode, but I like all the vibes that come with it. Really good scenario. Hunting down the werewolf is really, really cool. The locations are very mean, but in a way that I think makes sense, because this is from the Dunwich era where locations were mean, but I think this one actually resonates for why they are mean. Carnival of Horrors, I think, is an amazing scenario. I think it's really, really good, really, really fun. It's one of my favorite standalones and one that I will pull out again and again and again, given the opportunity. I think it is just an amazing time from start to finish. Labyrinth of Lunacy, I think, is annoying. It's not really good, even if you play it in massive multiplayer mode. It makes sense. This is their first time trying to like piece it all together and understand what massive multiplayer is, and they have improved quite a bit from that since then. But Labyrinth of Lunacy, I think, is ultimately kind of just a dud in comparison to everything else that came after it. We're looking at the Eternal Slumber and the Night's Usurper. This is Guardians of the Abyss. I think Eternal Slumber is a great scenario. It's very challenging, very hard, but you feel very fulfilled if you're able to beat it. It has so many demands for you as a player that you need to answer and build your deck around, and if you're able to do that, it feels so fucking good. So I think that Eternal Slumber is a great scenario. On to the Night's Usurper. I think this one's a little bit awkward. I'm going to put this one down in fine. The Explore into the second half is just like... there's a map change, and it doesn't really feel warranted or worth it. I think that the Guardians of the Abyss was kind of just like... let me just close the window. Guardians of the Abyss was kind of brought down by this as a whole for a campaign, but like as like a mini little double standalone. But it is very fun to play still when you put the two together. Like, again, Eternal Slumber is very good. I think a big thing for this is to showcase that I think, like, a 2-scenario campaign can actually be meaty. And I think that there was some more, like, stuff added around this. This could be something that, like, I think that if this was a 3-scenario campaign would be played very commonly and be very, very fun to do so. Murder at the Excelsior Hotel, that's a great scenario. I usually put it in good, but I think this year I'm going to put it in great. I'm feeling like I'm enjoying this one. My last few plays have been pretty fun as a group, kind of like working together to get there. There's been a lot of like fun little kind of like joking around and building the story around it, and I'm feeling like high on Murder at Excelsior Hotel this year. I think it's great in the last few times I've played it. It has my big problem with it is that it's not really on the rails, because you can interact with the problems in a variety of different ways when you play it, But my big problem is that, like, it feels too much like the first half is like 4 turns too long, and the second half is like 4 turns too short, right? I wish that there was more time for the second half when things get really interesting, where you can put the weird pieces together and then see what happens when you get there. Meddling a mouth tap is fine. Nothing for it, nothing gets it. I'm a cat person, but that's not really why I don't like it. I just think that, like, the structure of the scenario is just okay, and it's enjoyable, but not particularly like spicy in like a positive way. War of the Outer Gods, I like this one. We're gonna give this one I'm gonna give this one a great. I like this scenario. I have fun playing in a massive multiplayer mode. Where's the blob? There's the blob. I think it's a great standalone. I think it gets the job done. This is actually probably my personal favorite to play in an epic multiplayer mode. My only big beef with that is that the blue guy always wins because people are afraid of the blue guy's effects, so the blue guy gets stronger quicker. But it is a fun time playing this one. I really like it. I like how each threatened in different ways. I like that there's Canada. Let's go! But I think that this is a great scenario. Machinations Through Time. I think this one is just fine. I think they did a really good job structuring the story for this one within the scenarios. But as a whole, it kind of just feels like, again, just doing a checklist to do a checklist. And I wish there was a little bit more, like, meat on the bones. I think there's a great, huge accomplishment, though, in the design where the past stuff finishes in the early game. The present stuff takes their majority stuff for the mid-game, and then the future stuff is rushing to finish in the late game. I think that is really cool and deserves it. Like, deserves its accolades for that. I think the enemy design is pretty good. But for me, what really is just that it kind of just... It feels a bit like busy work in a way that they didn't hit in other standalone scenarios. So I'm going to put that one in fine. The blob that did everything is... This shit's great. It's a fun scenario. I like playing an epic multiplayer, not as much as War of the Outer Gods, but Blob That Did Everything is very fun. Blob That Did Everything is also a really fun scenario to put into your campaign as a standalone, because it's not too oppressively difficult, and the rewards can be really good, so I suggest trying that out. But it's a great scenario. Hell yeah. Fortune and Folly Part 1, this one is fine. I don't really have any thoughts on it too much. I like the setup. I think that's pretty neat. And then part two is, I think, where things get, like, really interesting. Where Fortune and Folly Part 1 kind of reminds me of the Hemlock Preludes. But Fortune and Folly Part 2 is an enjoyable Arkham experience. I think as a whole, the standalones are good scenarios and worth your time. And it's fun to put Fortune and Folly in Scarlet Keys. We did that, Travis Byrne and I, and it was a good time. It's a very tough scenario, though, so just be prepared for that. Midwinter Gala is great. I really like this scenario. I think that this is probably the standalone that I'll always enjoy putting into a campaign if I had to choose one. The ally rewards are really fun, but what's really cool about Midwinter Gala is it kind of feels like Arkham Arcade mode, where you're given, like, a bunch of tasks, and you're like, okay, how do you complete these tasks? And you get scored at the end. And I think that that's really cool, and I would love to see them revisit this kind of structure, because I think it is really cool. I really like playing Midwinter Gala. And then last but not least, we have the new one, Film Fatale. I've only played this one twice. Yeah, I've done the Dinosaur Path and the Space Path, but I haven't done the Vampire Path. But I'm going to put this intrigued but need to play more. I like what I see so far. I think the standalone design, again, has been pretty good to great for the most part. And Film Fatale is no exception, and I'm very curious to see how Without a Trace is when they release that in, like, the fall. So I think that that's going to be pretty sweet. Okay. We've done it, chat. We've done it. Another giant-ass tier list in the books here with all the scenarios. 3 hours and 18 minutes at the time of me saying that. I think that oh yeah, I guess that's not every scenario. I haven't played any of the parallel ones, so I can't call it every scenario. No, but yeah, no, that's cool. I hear there are some good ones and some bad ones, but it's cool to hear they have a scaling reward system. That's kind of neat. Yeah. I'm gonna just start saying goodbye because my voice is shot. But I hope you enjoyed watching this. I'd love to hear in the comments, what are your favorite scenarios? What are your best of the best, right? Like, what are your best of the best scenarios in Arkham Horror, the card game? I'd love to hear from that if you're still watching at this point. In the meantime, consider liking, subscribing. These videos they're a feat. Like, they require a lot of sauce. So I hope you enjoy them. And if you want to support, you can like, comment, subscribe, or go above and beyond, become a YouTube member or a patron, which I would really appreciate. I'd appreciate the support for doing what I do. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, a GG's.